All right, starting to know what's going on. Bow, bow, bow. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. We're here with the Poker Live podcast, debatably one of the top poker podcasts in the entire world. My name is Joey One, aka Chicago Joey. Welcome to the podcast, my friends. It's been a great week of shows. We've had Rob Young on Tuesday. It was on Tuesday we had Rob Young on. Yesterday we had on the Young Prince, Fader Holes. And Monday, my debut news show came out. We talked about the $350,000 bet online jackpot bad beat scandal. I don't even know if it's a scandal. It wasn't really a scandal, but and then we got coming up here 5K challenge PO video tomorrow. News show Monday. Adam Pliska, WPT president on Wednesday, and a new series I'm trying out on Tuesday. It's a lot of content. I'm excited. To be back in the mix. But joining me today, guys, is a young man. Listen, guys, this guy's been on the podcast before. It was at PCA. Very legendary podcast. There might have been some drinks consumed. I might have been wearing glasses that didn't really look like Ike's, but they were glasses. So you could say they look like Ike's, right, in that they were glasses. And it was a really fun podcast. And people have been asking him to have him come back on at some point in time. And finally, we're making that happen. We got one of the top poker players in the entire world. He plays cash games, plays tournaments, play mixed games too, right? You're in the mixed game streets as well. You pretty much plays every single game at the highest stakes. Debatably, one of the top all-around players in the world. I don't know where he'd rank himself at in that mix. I'm sure some guys out there would try to stake a claim for that title, but certainly one of the men who could put up an argument for that claim, man. And he just took down the PLO Poker Masters main event, the biggest online Pot Limit Omaha tournament in history of Pot Limit Omaha, $50,000 event that took place on Party Poker. He's sponsored by Party Poker. Been around the poker world for a very, very, very long time. And we got Ike Hollywood Haxton in the mix here. What's up, Ike? Welcome back to the show, man.
How's it going? Good to be here. That was quite the introduction. I'm feeling good about myself now.
I feel like I downplayed that one. I mean, I could have went on for about 10 minutes. You know, you've been in the poker for a long time, buddy. You've been here for, 15 years. I just posted a clip on Twitter. This amazing clip with your hair over here. Let me pull. Where the heck is this clip right here, man? All right, let me find this clip for the people. I got to get the clip for the people, but. It's your hair's flowing. It's really long. You look like you're about how old were you in that video right there?
21. Just turned 21.
You just turned 21. Yeah, I mean you basically look like you look like a little kid in the video. So I mean you got this long hair flowing in the wind. You're carefree. You're playing on the water. It's crazy to think about. Now it's 2020. You've been in the game for so long, huh?
Yeah, that was a long time ago. It feels like a different lifetime, man.
Yeah, people can kind of see here. You got the flowing hair right here.
Diamonds.
You're playing this very crazy, iconic hand. WPT hair's blowing in the way. You got these sick glasses on, looking like Phil Hellmuth when he wears his black glasses.
Flop comes ace, queen, 4 with 2 hearts.
I just want to talk about this hand real quick because I know people like the poker hands, and then we're gonna get more into it. So you got deuce 3, right? So Ryan Dott limps the button with the 7-5 offsuit. You've got deuce 3 of diamonds. So the flop's ace, queen, 4 with 2 hearts. Ryan bets the pot, and you decide to check call with the 2-3. So you have the gut shot, you have the 5.
Yep.
Also, Ryan limps the button, so you know his hand might not be that aces, queens, ace, queen, those type of hands. So you check the turn, he checks back on the king.
The queen of clubs comes off.
The river's the queen of clubs, so it's ace, queen, queen, king 4. You have deuce 3, you have the nut low, and Ryan has 7-5 offsuit. So he bet flop, he limp button, check flop, or bet flop, check turn. And now on the river, you guys decide to go a little fucking crazy here.
Well, Vince, the only way Isaac can win this pot is to bet at it.
People in the chat haven't seen your hair are gonna probably get scared. They're gonna be confused. So
You
you bet the pot. I mean, this is a crazy fucking hand right here, Ike.
Yeah.
I can't believe what I'm hearing. Ryan, with almost as bad a hand, says raise.
Well, this is incredible. Vince, he thinks he's stealing the pot.
I mean, until the river 3-bet, it's like pretty normal, right? I flop a gut shot, I check call the flop. I'm never folding the flop. Turn goes check, check, and then I bluff at the river for a size that looks like maybe an ace, maybe a queen. I mean, if I were playing the hand today, I'm not sure I'd use that size. I'd probably go like a little smaller with an ace and a little bigger with a queen. But yeah, I mean, up until I bet and get raised, it's like basically a normal hand. And then obviously the 3-bet shove is a little out of line. I'm a bit out on a limb there. I don't know. I didn't think he'd check the turn with a queen.
You think about it for a while. We got Mike Sexton and Vince Van Patten, a legendary commentary duo on the call here.
Over the top. Please don't start that.
He's got the worst 2 cards.
You're just staring at the guy. Ryan's terrified. He's like, please don't do anything. Shout out to Ryan Dodd, DFS player now. He's in been around.
Ryan's
the
a great guy. I still talk to him occasionally on Twitter and stuff.
I love this family reaction. Is that that is your family, right?
Yeah, that's my mom and my sisters.
Okay.
And Zoe, who was my girlfriend then, now my wife.
And you show the 2-3. He's like shocked. Mike Sexton's got the floral shirt on. Ryan's just shocked. This is a great edit right here. Your family's cheering. Yeah. So when you look back on that hand, what do you think about that hand, right? So you think that just a river, you didn't think you'd have a queen, but everything else was pretty normal at that point in time. Check call, pot size, but on the flop, check turn, and then lead river for a smaller size.
I mean, I was like basically just learning to play no limit hold'em at this point. I'd been playing poker professionally for 3 or 4 years, but all limit hold'em before that. And I think the way I thought about the hand was very limit hold'em. I was just like, well, he limps, I check. I guess I probably don't have an ace, so he's going to bet the flop with a lot of stuff, and then on the turn he's going to think a queen is like almost always still good, so he'll always bet it. So when I bet the river and got raised, I was like, if this was a limit hold'em hand, you basically don't get raised on that river, because they never have anything good when they check the turn. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really know how to play big bet yet, so the hand just kind of broke my brain. I was like, well, he can't have anything, why'd he raise? I guess well, yeah, fuck it, all in.
So that makes sense. So yeah, so in limit there, if somebody did flop a queen, even though the king comes on the turn, they're gonna continuation bet the turn as a standard with third pair there.
I think so, yeah, most of the time. I mean, I'm not actually good at limit hold'em by today's standards either, and maybe if that was a limit hold'em hand, there actually is a decent amount of checking with the queen, but I kind of don't think so. I think out of position is raising either pre-flop or on the flop with an ace, like more or less always, and then raising flop with a lot of their queens even. So like the check call is just going to be like a bunch of wheel gut shots, a bunch of fours. I mean, all the king high, but like also all the jack high. So yeah, I think you just keep betting with a queen virtually always.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense, right? I think a lot of players, when they come to PLO from no limit hold'em, I mean, they ask me questions. I just forget that are questions sometimes because I've been playing. So I switched over, about 9-10 years ago at this point in time. Yeah. So when people ask me these questions, I just sometimes think that they think a flush is stronger than it is, right? They look at flushes, they look at straight boards, they look at boards that change the nuts a lot different than someone who plays PLO. So when I go play no limit hold'em, and I see the board change, and like the flush gets there, I'm like, oh man, they gotta have the flush here, right? And the reality, they have the third pair, and they don't necessarily have those kind of things. So, what do you think are like some of the biggest differences between pot limit Omaha and no limit hold'em for you? Because you play both of those.
Well, yeah, I mean, like you said, in Omaha, both players just have the nuts or a very strong hand so much more often, and the game is, so much more about value betting the nuts and balancing that with like some bluffs and semi bluffs. And when the board changes, that's a much bigger deal. The range imbalances are way bigger. There are a lot more spots where you check call 2 streets and then a draw gets there, so you lead a whole bunch of the time. That happens much less in hold'em. And then I guess the other big thing is, I don't know who first said this. This is not a phrase that I get credit for, but I think a really helpful way to think about it is that PLO is equities driven and no limit hold'em is frequencies driven, where PLO, it's all about just like basically looking at how good your hand is and how good your equity is against their whole range, against the range they'll continue with if you bet, stuff like that. Whereas in hold'em, you have a whole lot of hands that have like almost no equity, and you need to be making all of these decisions about like how often do I bet with complete trash.
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't thought much about the differences between these two games, but I guess that makes sense, right? So I started trying to study a little bit more hold'em because it appears that these tournament series, I mean, we got these tournament series coming up. We got the World Poker Tour Championships on Party. There's the Summer Series Poker Stars. There's the World Series of Poker. So there are a lot of these series coming up, and I'm kind of looking around, and for yourself, when you look around at the landscape of poker right now, and we can't really play live poker. I know you like to play the high-stakes live games. I don't think there's any high-stakes live games going anywhere in the world. Maybe King's Casino. I saw King's Casino had some action over there in the casino the other day. I don't know what's going on over there, but...
Yeah, I mean, there are poker rooms open in Vegas, but I'm not messing with live poker right now. Doesn't seem like a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, you've been posting a lot about what's currently happening in the world, about kind of your stance and your take on the situation. Mm-hmm. You know, so how are you kind of looking at the world right now, and what's kind of your take on it?
I mean, that's a pretty broad question, but I mean, from a personal perspective, I'm staying home. I'm not taking any chances. I'm not. I mean, it's not just about personal safety. It's about like being a responsible member of your community and not going out and taking the chance of getting infected and taking the chance of infecting other people. So yeah, I've just been staying at home playing poker on the internet for the most part. In terms of like how I feel about what's going on in the world in general, you know, I've been really disappointed at how the United States has botched the response to the pandemic. I think, I mean, I am a cynical, negative sort of person to begin with, but I could not have predicted just how badly we would botch this when it started. You know, I remember having an argument with my wife in early March or something about whether this was going to cause a homelessness crisis. And I thought probably not. I thought that, you know, the powerful people in the United States would, not because they are bound to ethical behavior in any way, but just because they would identify that a stable society is to their benefit, would force the government to take the steps necessary to not have a giant percentage of the working class become homeless. And that's not going to happen. It turns out that the first thing we do when we get out of lockdown is we run special eviction courts and convention centers to throw everybody out on the street as soon as possible. And yeah, it's just sad and demoralizing to see that our country is just that committed to cruelty. I don't know. It's disturbing.
Yeah. I mean, it's really crazy when you take a look at how the system in place is and how the coordination, there's so many people that are against each other in the political world that they all have different agendas. They all see things differently. They want to frame it as a political win in some side, and that impacts each state. And there seems to be no communication between the states. And it just seems like the chain of command and the system in place in terms of how these things get fixed and sorted out is just completely broken. And
yeah, I mean, the federal government just doesn't work. I think that it's been an explicit aim of the Republican Party, the right wing, to break the federal government for 40 years now or so, and they've done a pretty good job. The federal government doesn't really work now. Not that the Democrats are great either. There's
issues on both sides. Yeah,
there's no real forceful call from the mainstream left to do anything about this situation. That there hasn't been a bill that remotely adequately addresses the present situation introduced in the House of Representatives, which is controlled by the Democrats. So I mean, it's easy to blame the right because they're worse, but the left is also useless.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it kind of seems like that might be where things are headed, where there'll be some major changes to the system. We're kind of seeing that now in America, where they're trying to rewrite history in some capacity, take down these statues that stand for certain words, and more of a focus on language. And the idea of debate and cancel culture is going back and forth, and people are saying, okay, maybe we should allow certain terms and certain words, ideas to be debated, versus if someone says something that a large percentage of loud people don't agree with, they're going to get outraged and try to make that person lose their job or anything like that. So it seems like we're developing new standards, and kind of things are moving in a very interesting direction in the world right now, especially on social media. Out in the regular world, of course, like, it's not that, because you're not really communicating with people at scale like that. But on Twitter and on YouTube and on Instagram, you can communicate. Facebook, you can communicate at this massive scale with so many different types of personalities and people, and movements are artificially and or naturally created that can help to drive narrative, whoever might be in charge of that agenda. So it's kind of all these things are developing right now with internet discourse, which I find quite fascinating. And I mean, yeah, I got like really deep into this political world researching it these past couple months. And then I was like, okay, we got big poker coming up here in the summer. I still want to make poker content, so I want to go back to this. But I found that stuff very interesting. And you know, I was going through the same thing you talked about, which is like being demoralized. Like, how could this be the system in place? But then when I started researching how the system was in place, I found out, you know, there's a lot of things at stake, and there's a lot of moving parts, and a lot of it is just follow the money back to whoever's in charge of these people, whoever's in charge of these situations. And oftentimes, right, that's going to be a driving force behind the motivations from people who are making decisions.
Yeah, the thing that I've found so demoralizing about the last 4 or 5 months, I guess, is that I used to more or less believe that you could follow the money and power, and that things happened mostly in a predictable way that benefited the financial interests of the powerful, which, you know, is awful, but it's at least a predictable framework for thinking about the world. And the American response to the pandemic has been so thoroughly insensible that it's impossible for me to identify whose interests are being served.
Right.
Unless you think that there are powerful people who want Americans to die as an end in itself. Which increasingly it just feels like that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of fucked up my worldview.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people are kind of going through. And people are talking about why we started talking about this first. I mean, first of all, I think it's really interesting, and it's also very relevant to the poker life and what life it is itself, especially if you're two people who are involved in poker, you're playing poker, you're making poker content. This sort of thing really affects your future in a lot of ways, right? Are you going to, like Ike, what were you doing before the pandemic started? You were traveling around a lot, you're playing a lot of poker in all these different spots, I'm assuming. And
yeah.
And now your life has to change drastically in a lot of ways. And you, of course, are trying to figure it out just like everybody else. Everyone's lives are changed here in some types of way. And we don't necessarily all know how to figure it out. How do we adjust? How do we become different human beings? How do we perceive the game of poker and the poker world itself? How do we perceive these things maybe differently now that our worldview has gotten flipped upside down in a lot of ways?
Yeah. It's been weird. You know, I'm really lucky to be able to play high stakes online poker, to have the skill set to succeed at that. And professionally, this has been fine for me. I've stayed busy. I've been running good and making a bunch of money. I've been all right. And that's relatively unusual, you know, for a poker player, or just for a person in the world who has to work for a living. And I certainly appreciate how lucky I've been. And it has been very weird. It's difficult to plan ahead in any sort of way right now. I don't know when the next time I'm going to play live poker or travel for anything will be. It's difficult to predict. It seems like almost certainly not in the next 6 months. And then you start getting into the part of the timeline where a vaccine is looking reasonably likely. I think that's kind of where I'm at, is just kind of a holding pattern, taking it day by day until there is a vaccine. A lot of the rest of the world, it seems likely, may be able to get back to normal before there's a vaccine because they have taken the appropriate measures to control the spread of the virus. I think Americans are not going to be welcome to join the rest of the world anytime soon. So it is what it is.
I know some stuff you've been researching for sure. This is certainly a big part of the theory out there in terms of how the world power structure dynamic is going to change, and if you followed in the past recent years in terms of how American government was handling things and pulling out of certain deals and taking military bases potentially out of certain countries, they're kind of readjusting the world power, and instead of America being this major military power around the world, kind of saying, okay, let's make it more of a what's the word they use? Is it not globalism, right? It's something where the other countries are also rising to power, and they sort of share the world power versus America being a dominating world power.
Yeah. It does seem like the American empire is in decline. Was before this, but it would not be surprising for history to look back at the pandemic as a pivotal moment in the decline of America, maybe the ascent of China. And, I look around at the world and I think good, because the pandemic, it's kind of a practice run for climate change, right? You have to get a coordinated, centralized response to something based on an understanding of science in order to avoid large-scale death and devastation. And America has proven culturally incapable of doing that. So the faster the world reaches a state where they can make progress on that without us having to lead, the better chance we have at possibly being able to make an intervention that will be soon enough and big enough to avoid catastrophe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can tell you have definitely one of the more, as you said in the beginning, like a negative, like a cynical view of what's going to happen. I try to stay a little more positive, and I try to hope that things will change, because I also get like that too, but I just sort of research the idea of how positive negativity affects us, and especially when you're trying to do a lot of work, if you're trying to do good work, sometimes the mood that you're in affects, especially with content, right? It'd be real hard to have a real negative outlook on this and then still try to do content, because then that kind of comes off in what your content is. So when you're making content, if you have that view, it's kind of like not GTO at all. So I've been trying to reframe my worldview on things, and I think it might be in some ways, right, unrealistic, depending on what you read. And there's so much information out there, and there's so many different ways you can go on the research path out there that you can believe a lot of different things, because now there's so much information out there that is going to disagree with everything we're talking about right here. And people they've been spending a month on reading that, and they just think, okay, this must be what reality is, because I spent the last month following down this rabbit hole. When they hear someone else talk about a different type of information, they say, no, there's no fucking way that's true. And this intense discourse and all these different topics is then created. And with a very serious thing like this, that the mainstream media is pumping out at us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and now it's changed our entire world. It's quite interesting to see the different types of topics people now come at this head-to-head with, and they just get completely upset at you and outraged that you would ever say anything that they might disagree with on topics that they find themselves extremely caring about, like this particular one right here.
Sure.
So
I do think in that context, though, it's worth noting that a lot of this is a matter of objective fact, and a lot of the problem with America's inability to respond reasonably in the present situation has to do with a failure to arrive on a consensus about objective facts. And
Right.
I think it's a mistake to allow yourself to become confused about what is a matter of fact and what is an opinion about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it kind of the education process of helping or teaching or getting people else to understand that as well too is quite a challenge. Of course, like with the push of the fake news concept and the narrative in your mind, it's very easy to look at something that someone presents as a fact that may be researched and may be an objective fact, and for you to look at that and say, I'm so used and so programmed to not believe the news that when I look at that, I don't believe what you're saying.
Yeah,
So
of course.
it's challenging for those people. It's challenging for a lot of people out there to even tell what the facts are.
Right. I think that is the result of a deliberate campaign by powerful people to undermine our ability to identify and agree upon the basic facts of reality.
Yeah, right. I agree. Here, let's talk some poker, man. Let's get away from poker for a little while. Let's get away from that for a little bit. Let's talk some poker. So, how are you feeling about poker right now, Ike? How do you feel about the future, just in terms of maybe the game itself? Assuming that we have online to still play and we still have the online community around the world, what are your thoughts on things, man?
Poker's been great lately. There's just been a ton of action. I've been having a lot of fun playing online. I've been really primarily a live player for a few years now, and it's been fun getting back to my roots and hanging out in my sweatpants, eating peanut butter out of the jar all day. I'm back in my happy place.
Yeah, how you been? There are a lot of games out there, and the private game world's kind of booming for high stakes, and the public site world's kind of booming. There are a lot of games to play.
Yeah, there's just a ton of action. I've been playing a lot of tournaments online. I mean, 2 weeks ago, I played 300K in buy-ins on a Sunday.
Yeah, when does that happen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like the action's only picking up and up, and we have a lot of options out there. We have a lot of sites competing against each other. There's a lot of offshoot sites. I mean, there's a lot of sites that are kind of making the rise up. You have the ability to play in private tournaments or private games on the application software. It seems like the future of online poker, if your goal is to win money, is looking pretty solid. Whether you're a tournament player or a cash game player, looking really good.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see. What do you think about the evolution to a more private atmosphere in the online poker world versus what we've had in before, where whoever's starting the tables, whoever has the fastest ability to sit at a table? Like, what are you kind of thinking about the privatization of things?
I don't know. It doesn't feel good to me. I came up in the early days of online poker, which was a very, open landscape where the best players who were putting the most work into finding the good games and being at their computer all day ready to play were the ones who got to play. And on a certain level, it's frustrating to me to see things move in a direction where you're actually specifically penalized for being a good player. You don't have access to certain private games for no reason other than because people know you're pretty good and they don't want to play with you. That sucks. At the same time, it's easy to see why that's a natural evolution. The players who are losing money have the power and can decide who they want to play with. And it was bound to happen that some of them would decide that they prefer to play with a curated player pool that they have a better chance against. It is what it is. I don't think I have any natural right to play in all of the best poker games in the world. If there are going to be games that I'm not welcome in, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think about it too much. I just try to keep doing my job and playing in the best games I do have access to and playing as well as I can, making money. And there's certainly still no shortage of publicly available games, and sometimes I do have access to private games.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree that it is a natural evolution in terms of if you're a weaker player and your goal is, okay, well, I want to try to be able to actually win sometimes. Well, if I play with better players versus worse players, I'm going to have a better chance versus the worst players because they're also playing similar to me. And then in addition to that, you have game hosts who maybe been poker players before who are used to making a certain amount of money. They say, well, if I just start the game and I can run the game here and then I can make money from the game and then I can play with whoever I want to play because I can play in the game too. And then I'll get those recreational players and I'll educate them and say, hey, you realize they were here because of you, right? And then the recreational player says, never thought about it like that. Okay, that makes sense. Or then they go in this other game where it's more fun and they're sold on that idea of a game. So it makes sense that would be an evolution to where the games will go. And now with the ease of access to starting a club or starting a game, there's so many options out there, so many sites out there, so much different technology that it's really fine to do, yeah. I think a lot of people are kind of upset about that in some ways, the players who feel like they don't want it. But I think it's like a natural evolution in terms of now you as a poker player have to either diversify the amount of games you play. So maybe you play tournaments, maybe you play mixed games, or you have to get better at your ability to find different sites and move money around. So like the idea of what that high stakes poker player means to me now just shifts a little bit. And I guess it's a matter of time in some ways. It's kind of always been shifting and it'll probably continue to shift again in the future.
Yeah, of course.
Right. Yeah, I guess when you look at where you've gone with poker, are you happy that you took the time to learn the different game types for Pot Limit Omaha, No Limit Hold'em?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my only regrets on that spectrum are not having done more of it and faster and sooner. Every time I've made a decision to learn a new game, start playing a new format, the only thing I've thought was this was a good idea and I should have done it sooner.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was a couple years late transitioning from Limit Hold'em to No Limit Hold'em in 2007. I think I was quite a few years late transitioning from No Limit Hold'em to Pot Limit Omaha in 2013 or so. I think I got to short deck at least a year late in, I guess, 2018. I started to play it fairly seriously. 2019, I improved a lot relative to 2018. Mixed games as well. I guess I started playing high stakes pretty seriously in 2015 or 16, and that was a few years too late. I mean, not too late in the sense that it didn't work out, but that it would have been better if I'd made all of these changes sooner.
Right. So is that idea being that maybe it would be more of an advantage to try to be the first mover to some of these new games, and especially with the ability to create the technology these days to help you expedite your process to get better at new games. And then if somebody else has private access to that and you as a person don't have public access to that, you're falling behind the year it takes or 2 years it takes for those people to study. And that's not saying you can't catch up, because we've seen that your ability to catch up and compete at the highest stakes against the best players, right? You mentioned PLO when you switched over. You still were competing against those other top guys pretty quickly. It didn't seem like it took you very long. So even if it might have been a couple years late for yourself, it didn't seem like it really impacted you too much in terms of the success you might have had, but maybe maximizing that success in terms of the bigger years in the beginning when you had a bigger advantage and you're able to get to that advantage quicker would be something that you probably think about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, and this has been apparent all along, but it gets more apparent every year as a professional poker player that so much of your job is just being in the right place at the right time and identifying games that are growing, places where people are playing high stakes in a format that doesn't have a bunch of like really great extreme specialists playing it yet. That's where you want to be.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I think that most people out there sort of they might understand that, but not necessarily be interested in doing that because in their minds they came up playing one game and they focused on one game. They've been able to make a living at that one game, and the idea of putting themselves out there and not being as good at a game or having to put themselves in uncomfortable situations outside of the game of poker themselves kind of freaks people out a little bit, and they just don't necessarily have interest because they've built their lives maybe sitting at home playing online poker, going to the casino playing online poker, not really interacting with a ton of people. And the idea of doing something like that is real. It's like a real change to the habits you built up over all this time.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the barriers to entry are a big part of why there is opportunities. I mean, getting over the barriers to entry is kind of what I'm talking about. That's how you get to the best opportunities.
Right. Very interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people out there, I don't know if I guess how big do you think the high stakes pool is these days in terms of, because I was trying to think how many people were actually professional poker players on 2+2 back, 8 years ago versus now. And I mean, I think it's a lot less now because professional poker players have gone into something else and the newer players are using different means of communication, not necessarily a centralized forum like 2+2.
Sure.
But how do you think the community sort of evolved, and are there more recreational / kind of professional players in there, or is it the same amount of pros as it was before?
I think it hasn't changed that much in the last 10 years would be my guess. I don't know, there might be slightly fewer pros, or we might just have that impression because we're getting old and people of our generation are moving on and there are younger folks who we don't know. But yeah, I mean, it looks to me like it's about the same, right? I feel like an okay way of estimating is to just look at the World Series of Poker main event. That tournament is, I don't know, around 2/3 or 3/4 people who are more or less professional poker players, and it stays about the same size. It's growing slightly over the last few years. Obviously, this year's a bit of a disruption. But, you look at the World Series of Poker main event, you're seeing 5,000 plus professional poker players who can show up and play a 10K buy-in. Mm-hmm. I think that means there are tens of thousands of professional poker players out in the world. I think that number has stayed around the same since we came down off the crest of the poker boom. I think it decreased a little around either side of Black Friday and then has been pretty stable since, would be my best guess. I mean, this is I'm kind of making it up as I go, and this isn't a thing I would consider myself an expert about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good way to think about it. And I sort of look at it like, I've been trying to find these professionals, like where are they at? Who are they? Who are the next young people? And I've actually been finding a lot more than I expected. And
oh, there's the cat.
Hello, cat. Hello. Oh. But yeah, I've been finding a lot more professionals than I expected out there playing in these private games and playing in these different card rooms. What's up, cat? What's your name?
Amin.
Amin? What's up, Amin? What's up, cat?
G-Mean.
D-Mean.
Jimin after
okay,
member of BTS.
Okay, Jamin. All right, we're K-pop fans, huh?
K-pop fans.
Are you listening?
More my wife than me, but
do you listen to K-pop when you play online poker?
I do not know.
No. Do you listen to anything when you play online poker?
I used to listen to music basically all the time when I played online poker, and in the last few years, not nearly so much.
Not nearly so much. Why is that?
I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting old and my brain's not as good at multitasking. I used to find that it was hard for me to concentrate without music, and recently it's the reverse. I find music distracting. I don't really know what it's about.
Yeah, that's how I've been as well too. I used to listen to music when I played, but I used to like watch TV when I would 24 table. So I'm like watching a a television
Right.
series. Like this is boring
I was never
anymore.
quite like that. I've never been awesome at multitasking, but I've gotten worse.
Aaron Clark says Ike Haxton. Yeah, I mean that could be a nickname. Hollywood Ike Haxton. Ike Haxton. I can't even say that nickname, but
No, it doesn't roll off the tongue.
no, it doesn't. How do you like a Hollywood nickname? Hollywood Haxton. You like that nickname?
It's grown on me. I thought it was really silly at first, and it's grown on me a little.
Of course, it was silly at first. It was a great nickname. I'm like Hollywood. It's a great name to have. It's a great nickname. When you think about the nicknames you can have, I think it's pretty cool one to say.
It could be a lot worse.
That's true. No, definitely. Yeah, I think about the idea of multitasking though, and maybe it's just a habit. You build up these habits of multitasking when you're younger, and maybe as you get older, you start playing less tables because naturally there's less tables to play, and you start to realize like, hey, maybe you just do better playing 4 to 6 tables, and maybe you shouldn't have been playing so many tables to begin with, and then you start kind of just saying, okay, it may be getting smarter, and that if you focus on only 1 or 2 things, you're going to be able to put more of your energy on that and most likely be able to do better at what you do. And the more input that we take in, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, that's going to impact our ability to perform at a high level of things that we do. So maybe that makes sense. Well,
yeah, and poker's gotten a lot harder, man. I mean, 10 years ago, I would look at a spot, I'd be like, I'm going to bet.
Right.
I'm going to bet like 2/3 pot. And now I'm looking at a spot, I'm like, 15% check, 35% bet third pot, 50% bet full pot, check the randomizer. Okay, I rolled a check. So it's just a lot more going on.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, it had to be fewer tables when the decision making's gotten so much more complicated.
Yeah, right. Makes sense. Yeah. Kind of when you go through, you're sort of like, you take in information through your study and you're trying to match it up when you're playing and you're trying to remember, okay, this texture, I don't quite know the texture. What textures am I associating that with? And then how am I coming, you know what I mean? So you're kind of are going back a little bit, which is interesting. And that's how things developed. And I think now it's still a very new thing. And the ability to group spots together, there's going to be like a shift in the way strategy and the way the game of poker, I think, is thought out. And you're going to start finding out that certain textures, ideas, certain theories you can group together that'll form these new concepts that will be the way for us to remember. Because at some point in time, we're going to have we'll be able to have the game down. I think at just, there won't be as much. It won't be as this deeper. We need to really think about this. At some point, for some players, that's how they're going to learn. And probably the next generation who started off learning that way from the start maybe has a little bit of an advantage, plus they're a little younger too. So maybe they're able to kind of come to those conclusions. And I think the best players are able to come to those conclusions and able to draw parallels between spots. That's what makes them maybe the best right now. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly the direction it's going. I'm not sure it's going to get to the point where there are people who just play effortlessly perfect poker. I think it's really hard. A lot of stuff generalizes. You can learn some broad concepts that point you in the right direction most of the time, but a lot of stuff doesn't generalize. That there are a lot of just unique and specific situations, especially if you're talking about multi-way pots or tournament poker where stack sizes are changing and chips don't have linear value because you're dealing with a payout structure, not a winner-take-all situation. I think poker is going to remain really challenging and skill testing for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, that makes you feel good, right? Because I think a lot of people were very worried the other way. And I think that's the conclusion a lot of people have been coming to, is that like things are going to be fine for a long time here, right? It's not quite as doom and gloom and serious as was maybe speculated a few years ago by people who thought like, oh,
no, I mean, it's not like people had to stop playing chess just because there are computers that can beat people at chess now. Chess has not become a less challenging or interesting game just because there are computers that play it well.
Right.
It's become very different. A big part of being a great chess player is studying the computer outputs now, but chess or backgammon or That's the future of games, is that computers are going to be good at them, and it's not going to ruin it for people.
Right. They'll still be able to play there on a private level. You can still play in a private game with 8 other guys who don't necessarily care about playing that way. And I think you can still have a good time, and you can still win tournaments also with this style too, which is, I think what's great about tournaments is that no matter what skill level player you are, you can still win a tournament. You might not be able to win the $100,000 high roller event against 18 of the best players, but you're not playing with the best players in your tournaments. You're playing with other guys who are just like you. So on some of these sites where, especially in America with the Global Poker and with ACR and with Poker Bros, like, you're not playing against other highly skilled, highly level players, so you can still have a pretty good opportunity to take a score down. And even in Poker Stars, Party Poker, those type of sites, there's still plenty of weaker players continuously coming into the game at the lower stakes because the barrier to entry is very low. You just download your software, you play, and it's only $10 to play, and you can potentially win a big score. And I think people are always going to be attracted to the idea of winning a big score as a recreational player.
Oh, I agree.
You know what I mean? So I think a lot of people are, but they're kind of negative about it. And what do you see as the future of poker overall, just in terms of maybe the ability for people to make a living, and because they'll always be able to play, but I guess from the professional side of things.
I started saying poker's got 5 years left in like 2006, and I think I was wrong. I think that, the proliferation of AI is not as big a deal as I had worried. To the extent that you can secure games and make sure you're not playing against actual bots or people with in-game assistance tools, and I think that sites have been reasonably successful at that. Bots get caught, people lose their money, that there's a risk there, and cheating is just not that appealing. Like, people don't want to be a cheater and a thief, so they mostly don't do it. I think online games are still reasonably secure, and to the extent that games are safe and secure, the fact that there are AI tools that people can study to learn how to play better doesn't really ruin it. Poker in the AI era continues to be really fun and challenging and exciting. I'm having as much fun playing poker as ever. And I mean, not everybody agrees with this, but to me, when you look at the type of poker being played in super high roller tournaments today, with, the really technically sophisticated short stack, no limit hold'em, that's really exciting, fun, challenging poker to me. And we're all still learning, and getting better at executing on a shot clock, under pressure. I think poker played that way is still really fun to play and fun to watch. I think poker is healthy right now.
Yeah, I was watching. I've been doing these new tournament series where I go over some of the high stakes tournaments with players that people know, and I was noticing the short stack play was actually pretty interesting. It's pretty fun because you're kind of unsure. You get like, okay, well, you've got the 10 big blinds. This guy's got 5 big blinds. This guy's got 5 big blinds. Like, what do you do with the 10 big blind? How often are you folding? Like those sorts of spots. The other day I was watching it, and what's his name? Naza raised under the gun with 1.5. He left himself 1.5 big blinds. Somebody behind him goes all in with a less stack than him, and then Fedor re-shoves all in. So now Naza's got a decision for the 1.5 big blinds. I think he invested maybe 7. He's like, well, is the guy maybe thinking about folding? So he times down forever. And to me, I was like, I find this spot quite interesting, right? He ends up calling, and he ends up winning the hand. The other guy gets eliminated. But from a pay jump situation, like, is it smart there to maybe let this other guy, because Fedor is most likely going to have a really strong hand when he's making that play.
Right. Yeah. There are spots that come up where you do that for sure, where you open to more than half your stack, and then given certain action sequences behind you end up folding. And I think I mean, people have been making plays like that for a long time, but I think we're still really just beginning to figure out how those kind of mechanics work, and it's just extremely sensitive to all of the specifics of the situation, and it's really easy to make a pretty big mistake in either direction in those spots. It's difficult to even know once you're at your computer with Pro Poker tools, or not Pro Poker tools. What's the ICM Hold'em resources? Even once you have the tools in front of you at your computer, it's difficult to know what the right answer is, because ICM isn't actually that good a model. ICM is not the truth. It's usually better than chip EV under most circumstances, but ICM with a couple iterations of future game simulation is usually but not always better than straight ICM. And then you just kind of fudge it one direction or the other based on kind of qualitative guesses about the direction in which you think it's off in any given situation. It's still very much up in the air how final tables actually work. Nobody really knows.
So I've been learning more about this since I've been learning in tournaments, the future game simulations. Can you explain exactly what that means? Like, how is it different than what exactly is that?
Okay, so you start with ICM, which is basically just a formula where you put in a stack distribution and a payout structure, and ICM is a formula that takes that as the input and gives you a dollar value of each stack as an output.
And ICM uses an equation that who came up with the equation for ICM? Do we know?
I want to say it was. I want to say the full name is Malmuth Harville ICM. I don't even know who Harville is. Mason Malmuth and somebody else.
Oh.
They published this in like the mid '90s, maybe.
I'll be having Mason on my show this month, so I will ask Mason about it.
Yeah, ask Mason about the history of ICM. But so basically, the way ICM works is you say each player's probability of winning the tournament is equal to their percentage of chips in play. And then, given any of those players win the tournament, you pull their stack out of play, and after removing those chips from play, each player remaining's probability of getting second is equal to their portion of the remaining chips in play, and you iterate that down through each of the possibilities to get a probability that each player finishes in each position. And based on that, you just multiply the value of each position finish by the probability that you get it, and you get a value of having a given percentage of the chips in play with a given payout structure. So yeah, it's just a formula that gives you a value of a chip stack in a payout structure. And then given that mapping from chip distributions and payout structures to dollar values, you can use AI to, say, solve for push-fold ranges for every position. It's exactly the same as solving for push-fold ranges with every chip is worth $1, except in the payoffs of the game, you have the ICM values of the chip stacks at the end of the hand rather than the linear values of the chips won and lost. So when you use something like ICMizer or HRC to get ICM push-fold ranges, that's what's happening, is it's taking the ICM values of every possible chip configuration at the end of the hand and using those as the payoff matrix to solve for push-fold ranges in essentially the same way you would if you were dealing with chip EV. Now, when you talk about future game simulation, it's the same thing, except you, instead of solving one hand, you iterate over 2 hands or 3 hands or 4 hands or 5 hands. Generally, your computer is not going to be able to handle more than like 4 or 5 hands. And you have the algorithm play out however many hands, and then the payoffs are the ICM values after the end of that many hands. So it's basically the idea in either case, either the situation where you're dealing with a single hand and ICM values, or n hands of future game simulation and then ICM values. The idea is the ICM value is a heuristic for the value of playing out the whole tournament. It's an estimate of what everybody's EV is at a given moment, because you can't simulate the whole tournament to the end. It's too computationally difficult. So yeah, that's how that works.
I see people in the chat. They're like, "Can anyone explain what he just said right there?" Yeah, that's a great explanation, right? I mean, I think a lot of people out there, they're not going to necessarily going that deep when they say what's ICM. They don't think about it to that degree. Which is normal, right? Like, it's not a normal thing that I think a lot of people don't know much about, or they know a little bit about it, but it's fascinating. Yeah. So it sounds like future game simulations is the. We can have a little. Where did this come from? Who came up with this?
I want to say Hold'em Resources Calculator was the first.
Interesting.
Software that did that. I mean, that's been around for 10 years, probably. I mean, definitely, like, I played a lot of sit and goes in 2012, 2013, 2014. FGS wasn't new when I was doing that. It's at least 10 years it's been around.
So then I wonder if this is what you kind of wonder, right? Are there going to be other theories or other formulas that come up that maybe show us that, this is a even better way to look at these situations?
Oh, absolutely.
Them, right?
I mean, a thing that's happened recently is I don't remember what they're calling it. It's like true ICM or discrete ICM or something. But there's been a reformulation of the I think it's Malmuth-Harville is the traditional ICM model that, when like the poker tournament software says ICM chop is worth this, I think it's Malmuth-Harville. But in the last couple years, there's been an innovation where you keep the assumption that each player's probability of winning the tournament is equal to their percentage of chips in play, but rather than doing the thing where you pull when a player wins the tournament, you pull their stack out of play and then you iterate to see who gets second. Instead, you do a type of simulation where you have a small number of chips move at random from one stack to another. And you just do this over and over until players are eliminated, and players get eliminated in a random order that's proportional to their percentage of chips in play, and you proceed until somebody wins the tournament, which is much closer to how a tournament actually works. and it keeps the assumption that each player wins the tournament a percentage of time that is equal to their share of the chips in play, but you get a finish distribution for everybody else that makes a bit more sense. So that's like a marginal improvement on the ICM model that's been made recently. And I think people are working all the time on
their own formulas,
like real paradigm changes to a fundamentally different way of calculating stack values in a tournament. It's a super hard problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like good for the future of tournament poker when you think about it like that, right? I mean, it's
oh yeah,
right. You don't got to worry about it. Everyone still gets a chance to win. I mean, that's what I really like about the tournament structure. When I look at the tournament as a game type, I say, okay, well, because like I've been following Fortnite a lot, and the Fortnite top players, like me and you go play Fortnite, right? We're never they're never beating these guys. So then Fortnite has the decision. Well, then, all right, how do we balance? So they can balance it with different weapons. They can balance it. I mean, mainly it's different weapons. They can make things a little more challenging. Take away aim assist for controller players. They can do all these changes to make it more of a balanced game or make it more approachable. Or they can one thing they always talk about in these games that people always get triggered about it is the matchup system. They only match you up against people who are at your skill level. And I always thought about poker. I was like, that would make a lot of sense, right? If we had beginner players matched up against beginner players, and of course,
that's an interesting idea,
right? Like people might circumvent that system, and they say, "Well, I'll buy an account, and I'll
get there,
right? I'll bet on my girlfriend's account, make a new account, whatever." That might happen, sure, and got to police that, but something that, and that's like kind of what private games are in some ways. Except private games are the host is usually a good player, and he brings in his friend, and they clean up the game, and that's how those things work, and that is what it is, I guess, but. I'm trying to think of these new ideas that maybe make it more friendly for newer players to get in there, feel comfortable, play against people as their own skill level. Because if you only play against crazy good players, like you're probably not going to come back because you're like, why would you? You're not really having fun. You're not winning. You don't have a chance to compete. So I've been trying to think about ways. Okay, how can we give these players a chance to compete? And tournaments is already a great system in general because once those sack sizes get so short, the variance ramps up really high, and anyone can get hot and run well and. They can take down a tournament. Last night we saw Mac Daddy, an older man, came to Vegas, took down a tournament. A kind of guy you'd expect to see to win an online 6-max tournament in that situation.
Yeah.
So it's kind of I don't know. Do you think about that kind of stuff much when you think about ways to maybe even the playing field in some ways, whether it's the different matchup system or anything like that?
Oh, for sure. Just participating in high stakes poker for a long time and watching games come and go, it's very clear that the game formats that have longevity are games where weaker players have a chance to win. And I mean, deep stack, no ante, no limit hold'em is probably the game where weaker players have the least chance to win, and that doesn't really exist anymore. Nobody is. I mean, it does. The games are still spread, but like, it's not running a lot at high stakes. Mm-hmm. And that's because the weaker players never have a winning session. It's not fun, and it feels not fun. Like playing deep stack, no limit hold'em against somebody who's a lot better than you is just torture. Like. Just every time it's your turn, your opponent has just done exactly what you don't want them to do. They've just bet the exact amount that makes your hand miserable. And so that has not survived so well. Pot Limit Omaha is a little more forgiving for weaker players. You can play loose and aggressive and get your money in on the flop with a lot of equity. You're not getting tortured on the river with third pot bets and super hard decisions all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think tournaments are probably the most amateur friendly form of poker because stacks get shallow. A lot of the game is pre-flop. If you're a couple pips off in your estimate of, what range you should be calling off with in some spot or what you should jam over and open, you're not losing a ton of EV. You still have a pretty good chance of winning. And the payout structure makes it so that you can have a big score even if you're not one of the better players in the field. So yeah, I think it's been clear that poker has moved toward formats that protect the amateur players, because you put out a variety of offerings and they pick the games where they're having more fun.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that's where we see the idea of the mixed game format coming up, where you have maybe 20 games, or you introduce new games, and then the players that have a good time that mainly, I guess, the guys who are losing money in the game, they're going to pick these games. And interesting, right? I guess a lot of people maybe wouldn't want to go into that environment where they don't have a huge edge, right? A lot of people don't necessarily want to put themselves in spots where they don't have a plus EV situation. And I always kept thinking about that a lot yesterday, is that the trend has really evolved, that before, a lot of people, it seemed like people were willing to battle and maybe put themselves in some minus EV spots and maybe make some minus EV plays from time to time. But people, the obsession has kind of been to play so perfect and never put yourself in a minus EV spot, never lose a hand of money to the rake. And that's the trend we've seen at this high stakes. And that's why that whole sit out culture has come to be. It's because it developed, the sites didn't stop it. And then it just became a thing. Well, everyone sits out, I'm going to sit out too. And the people that maybe would even be fine battling a little bit, they don't even get a chance to battle, because the status quo is just that everyone just sits out because we must be in the most plus EV spot of all. We have to. We can't ever lose money to the rake. This concept of losing money to the rake is like gotten ingrained into people in these situations. And I find that fascinating how that's developed, where to the point where people don't really want to put themselves in those minus EV situations.
Yeah. It's a difficult problem. It used to be that there was kind of just so much money flying around at high stakes cash that it was fine to take the worst of it from time to time. And, if you were winning 80% of the time and losing 20% of the time, you were still making a lot of money. As games have gotten more competitive, and in a lot of cases, the rake environment's gotten a lot rougher. Not everywhere. People are a lot more cautious about taking even a little bit the worst of it. And it's hard to blame them, because if you're getting a couple hundred hands of pretty good poker in a day, taking the big blind 2 more times than you're supposed to over the course of the day eats your really upsetting amount of your win rate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense, right? I mean, it'd be nice, I guess, if those games would run in some ways, and maybe there are ways to incentivize those games to run, whether that's through a payment process where maybe you pay player. I mean, I think there's some extreme examples of ideas that could be tried. That there's so many things that haven't been tried, because the status quo in online poker has been the same for so long that the sites could have changed these things a while ago. They could have built different events. They could have changed structures. They could have attempted new things. They could have made things half private. There's so many things that you could do, right? You have a contest where you give a seat away, the loose cannon format. You give a contest to give a seat away, and that creates a game where people then compete to get in the game, right? There's so many different ideas that you could do to incentivize people to put themselves into minus EV spots, to potentially win themselves a chance to get into a plus EV spot, that I just don't think have been experimented with online poker at all. So when I look at online poker now, and people are like, oh, if it doesn't evolve, then and new ideas aren't tried, then of course we're going to end up in a situation where some people perceive it to be a certain way. But I think there's a lot of things that just haven't been done. When you study other games, you can see how they counteract these things and how they try to balance it and how they try to continue to put games on at all stakes. And
yeah, there's probably a lot of room for innovation there.
Yeah.
I mean, the one obvious thing that, of course, has been tried and that works really well is tournament poker.
Right, exactly, right? I mean,
tournaments eliminate not all, but a giant percentage of the predatory aspects of cash games that frustrate people. It starts at a fixed time and you play until there's a winner. And there's no fucking around about trying to dodge the big blind and not get dealt into hands where you're not winning, and you buy in, you play till it's over.
What do you think about these upcoming series? Got the WPT Championships on Party Poker. You're sponsored by Party Poker, World Series of Poker, GG. What do you think about those? Or how do you approach those?
Really
There's so many events and there's so much to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird, like playing a day of Sunday tournaments, and I don't want to play more than 6 tables, and I'm like missing 5Ks because there's so many things going on that I can't play them all. It's a really exciting time to be an online tournament player, and yeah, the upcoming series on Party with the WPT is going to be really cool. They're doing the thing where it's, a different format each week, starting with PLO 8 and then PLO and 6 max and so on and so on. Finally, with the super high roller week at the end and another online 100K. It's really cool to see buy-ins that big happening online. There's the big charity event coming up with the bounties.
Right.
I'm going to be playing that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how do these so many high stakes tournaments? How do there's so many people that play these things? Because you look at the PLO series and there's 10Ks and there's 50Ks, 25Ks. Where's all this money come from that people get to play these events? There's so many people playing these events, it seems like.
Yeah. If there are a few amateurs who want to play and maybe some differences of opinion among the pros about who's winning, then yeah, you get a 50K with 50 entries or whatever. And yeah, it's really cool to see. There are a lot of rich people who like playing poker.
Right. Either they're rich or they know the right people, right? I mean, your network in terms of getting into some of these higher stakes games seems really important, in that people who could either back you or tell you about the games or kind of keep you educated on the games, right? So the people that you're friends with and the people that you talk to seem really important in this high stakes tournament world. Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, I think that's like a thing people forgot, is that a lot of great players know multiple people, so then they all get to study together and they get to travel together, they get to keep each other motivated, and having that group of people around you. I mean, it's been talked about a lot, but I see a lot of poker players out there now who don't take advantage of that, and they don't try to find that. They're just kind of secluded, and especially if you have the habit of doing that for the past bunch of years, maybe your friends quit, and you're like, well, should I find new friends? And I find that they're pretty welcome to me, but I think people are welcoming in general if you present yourself as someone who's intelligent and wants to get better at what you do. I think other people are going to be attracted to that quality, and then that's how you form these friendships and bonds, and that's how you guys can motivate each other and get better. And that's what we used to see on 2+2 back in the day. You were a big poster on 2+2. And we've kind of seen the forum concept develop to Discord groups and to these smaller chat groups. I'm sure you're a part of some private chats, group chats, stuff like that, versus that open air kind of discussion, because the opinions maybe you just didn't care about the opinion anymore, or just it didn't become as popular or as relevant. And it's interesting to see how those things have changed, but there is still big forums. They're just not on the poker sites. They're on these Discord groups.
Yeah, sure.
So how important do you find that aspect in terms of studying with a group together of people?
Oh, huge. Yeah. I definitely value working with other people. Poker is too big and too hard to do it all by yourself.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot going on, right? There's only so many spots you can study, and you might think about something, forget it. Your friends bring it up, and they remind you of a concept, and you say, oh, yeah, I haven't been thinking about that for a little bit, so maybe that's answering a problem that I had in terms of my mind and getting to that point. And I guess when you try to stay sharp, and does it take you a lot of work to stay sharp? Does it take you a lot of focus? How do you kind of get yourself in that right mindset to not be distracted when you play and to play at the highest level you can?
I guess a lot of it is about routine. I definitely play my best when I'm playing every day, or at least like most days, and constantly reviewing hands after I'm done, talking about hands with other people, watching final tables after I've been eliminated from a tournament and just seeing how people play. Just being really immersed in it. I I guess there are positives and negatives to that. I can tend to lose track of everything else that's going on in my life, but I think that's been my secret, or the biggest thing that helps me to excel at poker is to just be totally immersed in it, to be thinking about it all day, every day. And I suppose I would like to figure out a way to perform equally well while being less totally immersed sometimes, but that's just what works for me to really excel, is to just be in it all the time.
Have you ever gone through periods of time in your life where you stopped approaching it that way and you took a step back and you said, let me try to spend more time on family or travel or enjoyment of an experience in life, and then you tried to get back to poker and you noticed that it maybe wasn't the same as you wanted it to be, and that's what's led you back to this immersion into the way you handle going upon doing it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've taken a couple weeks or even a month off from playing altogether a few times. And definitely when I go back, I feel like I've lost a little bit and need to catch up. And yeah, I've never really managed to do the kind of thing where I'm like playing 15 hours a week and then just kind of taking it easy. I'm either in it or I'm not. And I think partly that's just my personality and how I approach things. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think about this thing a lot, is that I know when I'm immersed in anything and I'm going to do very, very well at it. But then you think about maybe you want to put more of that energy into the relationships with your friends or family.
Sure.
And I think in the past, I haven't necessarily done that myself. So it's something that I'm reevaluating and saying, how can I construct my life to the point where I'm able to spread my energy out a little bit more, maybe allow more love into my life and less of this obsession with being as great as I can be at the current activity that I do. And maybe that's maybe that's a natural evolution in terms of when you get older, but
Definitely.
maybe it could be something that comes back at some point when I try this out and I say, you know what, I just really enjoyed living life more as somebody who, as was immersed. But I think there's maybe a more efficient way, maybe a reframing of what your goals are. And you say, okay, if my goals are to take advantage of every plus EV spot and play games constantly, well, what if I make a little bit less money and I get myself in a little bit less opportunity and I'm not quite as sharp, but I'm able to take advantage of these other opportunities? And maybe that actually is better for your poker game, because when you think about the idea of best player versus most money or making money, they don't often go together, in that you can be a terrible player and be in good games and make a lot of money, and you could be the best player in the world and not be able to get into the right games and only playing against the other best players and lose a lot of money. So when you think about it for yourself, how do you think about that idea of being the best player in the world versus trying to make a bunch of money and put yourself in spots where you're making easy money?
I don't know. For me, money is not necessarily the biggest motivator in poker. Obviously, I take seriously that I'm a professional and I want to make money, and it's how you keep score in poker. And I try to be making decisions that optimize my earn, but at the same time, learning and playing at a high level and competing are like actually what drive me. I like the competition. I think I would be a bit bored if I approached my poker career in a way where I was really single-minded about trying to play in the best possible games and not play against anybody very good, and I don't think I would be getting my competition fix. So yeah, I think probably to the detriment of my long-term earn, I have always just focused on trying to play really well and play in the relatively accessible, publicly available games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, right? You think about the competitiveness, and that's the downside sometimes is when you take a break from the competitiveness is trying to get that fire back for some people out there. And maybe when people play poker, that's the thing that maybe holds them back is that they really aren't that competitive and they don't necessarily want, like, I look at the game of poker playing against better players is that's how you can push yourself to maximize your output on mindset and to maximize your output on understanding the theory. And so I think that if you enjoy that challenge of it, then you're going to want to seek out competition. Where other people, they just kind of want to make money and they see it as a way where they can make money too. So they see it a little bit differently. But I think that's what wires professional poker players and professionals in a lot of things differently is that they just love the challenge of getting better at what they do. And oftentimes money is the way you're rewarded. And that's the way you see, okay, I provided a value to this business or I did a good job at my job here and I get paid extra money. It's a commission or it's however these payment structures are worked. But I think that's the way that his score is kept. Yeah, that's a good point, right? Is that I think a lot of people maybe don't see it that way. And that could be something that maybe holds them back in terms of having success at what they're trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that it's the strongest sign of mental health to just be obsessed with competition all the time. Right. But it's certainly adaptive for excelling at poker. And yeah, I don't think you see a whole lot of people among the most successful poker players who don't have that kind of obsessive drive to just beat people for the sake of beating people.
Right. I mean, so what do you think are the differences between these super high roller players and the players who are performing at the very highest levels? Like, what do they have versus players who are a few notches below that, but maybe still professional poker players who maybe wonder why they don't reach a certain level of performance, success, results, anything like that?
Yeah, I think that compulsive drive is really a lot of it. And I think that's gotten clearer over time. Like, you look back 10 years ago or so, and at a live tournament stop, everybody was like partying after the day is over and staying up late, getting drunk, there to have a good time. And, they show up and they play poker and they take it seriously for the 10 hours a day that they are in the tournament, but then they're there to have a good time. And you look at the people who are playing super high rollers now and they are, getting up early, getting a light cardio session in, eating a healthy breakfast, studying for 45 minutes, going and playing the tournament. When they're done, maybe they'll talk about hands over a beer with a friend for a little while and then go back to their room and study some more and then get 8 hours of sleep in and just do that over and over until the stop is done. And then they go home and they continue just studying all day, every day. And if there are some people doing that and you're not one of them, you're not going to be beating the ones who are. So it's just the lunatics rise to the top.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, right? I mean, I think some people might look at that and say, do they find that appealing? Or do you think people still like competing against that? Do you think from the recreational players, they like coming into this world and saying, hey, I know that these guys are doing this, but I don't give a fuck. I'm still going to try. And I think I can still beat these guys just based off my own understanding of poker and how I feel about myself.
I think some of them do. I think, if I picture myself 20 years from now, I got out of poker, did something else for a little while, and ended up becoming very wealthy doing whatever and got back into playing poker as an amateur. I think that is how I would want to do it. I would want to play tournaments against the best players and challenge myself and get my ass kicked. And it would be fun seeing the best players do their thing and trying to hold my own against that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would appeal to me more than playing in like a relaxed private game setting where people are kind of pretending not to be trying as hard as they are. And I think the open and direct competition at high stakes tournaments it's appealing in its honesty. The high stakes cash game world can be a lot of bullshit where like, we're playing for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the pros in the game, that's a lot of money to them. The amateurs in the game, it's a lot of money to them. Maybe it's not like life-changing. Pros, they're out for blood, and if they're mostly not doing a great job of concealing it. And like the pressure to act like this is a fun social thing, it is a fun social thing, but everybody's out for blood. And I feel like the high stakes cash game world can be kind of full of shit that way a lot of the time. And there's no bullshit in a super high roller tournament. Everybody is openly there to play their best.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So I guess does that make you not want to play more of the tournaments high stakes cash games, or is that something that maybe you try to lean away from a little bit, or do you think that even though that it is kind of a bullshit setting and people are maybe putting on a facade or anything like that, do you still find doesn't matter to you? You still play?
I mean, I just try not to participate in the bullshit any more than I have to. If I'm in a private cash game, I'm not going to like tank for 4 minutes and stare somebody down and make them have a bad time, but I'm not going to pretend I'm not trying to play my best.
Right.
And if that means there are some games I don't have access to, I can live with that. The high stakes cash that I do play, like the mixed games, the Bellagio is the main high stakes cash that I have played over the last few years, are pleasantly free of bullshit. It's a competitive environment. Everybody is trying and open about the fact that they're trying. Mm-hmm. And I like that about that. I feel uncomfortable in the kind of game where like you see this all the time with private or semi-private, even games in casinos where you have to like know the right people and show up at the right time, where like everybody's drinking, but 7 out of the 8 people at the table are all trying to drink as little as they can possibly get away with while pretending to be having fun drinking. And everybody's like trying to pressure each other to drink more and then not really drink that much. And it just like bullshit like that, I just don't have very much patience for it.
Yeah. So you don't, I guess in the mixed game, is Doyle Brunson still plays in that game?
Yeah. Doyle probably puts in more hours a year than I do. It's incredible. He's 86 and just still on the grind.
When you think about a guy that's been immersed in poker, I would say he's the guy that's been immersed in poker for the longest time since the 70s. I mean, it seems like he's been playing consistently since
60s.
60s, yeah.
Since early 60s, maybe.
I mean, I guess that's how you stay so sharp when you are 86 years old, is the ability to compete with other really great younger players. It's just you've dedicated your life to it in a lot of ways, and you've just immersed yourself in it completely.
I mean, yeah, he is unbelievable. Somebody being around as long as him. I mean, no one else has done it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, not to my knowledge. I mean, I don't. Are there still any other older people that come in to play the mixed games? I'm sure they go play maybe the 30-60 or something like that. They don't have a bankroll to be able to play the highest. So there
are a few guys in their 70s who play pretty regularly. Lyle Berman plays all the time. And yeah, a handful of other people, not names that would necessarily mean anything to most viewers, but yeah, there are several dudes in their 70s who play regularly.
Yeah.
But not 86.
When you think about goals for yourself, do you see yourself being around the poker world for the foreseeable future? Or can you see yourself doing something outside of poker where maybe you do start something else?
I don't have anything resembling an exit strategy or immediate plan to do anything else. But at the same time, I don't think I want to be a full-time professional poker player in 20 years. Maybe another 10. But poker's a young person's game, man. It's getting harder. And I don't think I would have that much fun being a professional poker player if I wasn't competing at the highest level anymore. And the idea that I'd be competing at the highest level in my 50s doesn't seem likely to me.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong.
It seems more like you have to have the desire to want to do that. And once you lose the desire to want to compete there, that's when you start focusing on other things in your life. And that's the
sure.
point, right?
I'm not quite as hungry as I once was, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that trend will probably progress. That seems to be how it goes for nearly everybody.
Yeah, maybe it is a young man's game. I guess we haven't really seen. I mean, the problem in poker in some ways, I think from like a community standpoint and from like an inspiration standpoint, is that we haven't really got to see these new younger players, and we don't really know who they are and know their stories, know their journeys, because there isn't that 2+2 for these people to post a sick graph and get known. Now there's so many platforms that it's real hard for the community as a whole to come together and identify these new talents as people to watch out for, and we don't really able to see them, and we're not able to know who they are necessarily. And a lot of people that get known are people that try to get known themselves, and most of the time there's a disconnect between trying to be well known and also playing really good poker. So
almost no overlap in general.
Like, you know what I mean? Like when I was playing a lot of poker trying to get to high stakes, like I would write a blog, but I'd post on 2+2 and just play poker every single day. That's all I really did. And once you start doing other things, you start making content, you start saying, oh well, you can maybe make a living out of doing this kind of stuff, or like your energy gets distracted all over the place. You get distracted. Oh, yeah. There's more things coming to your world, and you really got to be focused if you want to be one of those top tier best of the best type of players. You have to have that locked in. But now there's so many different ways to go upon it where you don't have to be that way, and you can still make a lot of money in private games, or you can make a lot of money finding just the right situation for yourself. But I think it's unfortunate we don't get to feature those younger players out there, because they're out there and they're fired up and they're cocky as shit. Like, you remember how the poker players were when they were younger? These young guys, I mean, there still are that now. The older guys are too, but the young guys are still got that attitude, man. They're still fired up. I think it'd be great to kind of show that and get those stories out there as personalities
really cool
out there.
To see. I want to know who the 21-year-olds making $1 million a year are these days.
You think they're out there?
I bet there are a few, yeah.
I bet there are a few too, right? I mean, I would imagine so. And I guess now there maybe is more of a thing where you don't want to be known as a good player, because then you can't get in those games. I know I talked to some players who would consider themselves good, and they say, oh, I don't necessarily want to have a platform or want to have any profile because the opportunity. What I would say is I feel like you get a lot of opportunity. The more well-known you are, you do get opportunities to play in more private games, even if people think you're good. What do you think about that?
It depends on your specific circumstances and what games you're trying to play in and stuff. Somebody has to know who you are to invite you to come play. And I mean, the best possible thing you could be for access to games is a known whale. Right. But it's pretty hard to have everybody think you're a whale and actually win.
Yeah. Right.
So I think likely the next best thing you can be is some kind of under the radar killer with some good contacts, where people who are organizing games know that you can get it done, and the amateurs in those games won't know to be spooked by you. I think those are the people who have the best access to the most things right now. I mean, the ideal scenario would be to be one of those people and to have a credible cover, as, you know, some kind of real world job, a backstory where you look like an amateur or a semi-professional instead of somebody who is spending 40 hours a week buried in bio. And then, you know, being a big name pro is not the worst either. I sometimes have access to good private games, either because the organizer wants to get me in and have a piece of me, or just because, you know, I've been around a long time and I'm friends with people and they're not going to say, no, you can't play.
Right.
But yeah, I definitely think if there are young unknown talents out there, that they are not necessarily making a mistake by trying to stay unknown.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that, you know, there's two options, right? Is you can be more of a known player in some ways in the public game world, in the public tournament world, in the cash game world, or you can take this option too. I mean, there's multiple different options that you can take right now, which I think is really cool, whether you want to play live cash or online cash or live private, online private. I mean, now not as much with live, and, you know, I'll be interested to see how it develops over time, maybe in the next year. You know, I feel like it's going to come back at some point in time, and we're going to find out more about what's going on with the world and whether we get a vaccine at scale and everyone takes it. You know, we don't know what's going to happen with that, but I'm trying to stay optimistic and I'm trying to stay hopeful, because it seems like a more enjoyable way to live. So,
I mean, yeah, this will pass. The world will get back to normal in 6 months, a year, 2 years. Who knows how long it'll take, but
yeah,
it will pass.
Yeah, my buddy N2 Deep LA in chat says live private games booming in LA. I'm not surprised. People in LA are fucking crazy, so I wouldn't be surprised to hear that out there. Do you have any advice for an aspiring a cash game player, successful cash game player at mid stakes, trying out tournaments? Right? What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's going from the cash game format? Can you even think back to that first time to go into the tournament structure? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, you have to learn how to play tournament poker, play where chips don't have linear value. It's a big change. I think maybe play some sit and goes. I think that it was not actually early in my tournament career, but the couple years I spent playing a lot of 6-max sit and goes online, I think I learned a ton about how to play tournaments and have been a lot better ever since. I think you have to get the reps in playing final tables, playing bubbles, and it's a pretty steep learning curve. There's probably a lot of good content out there. I always shout out Run It Once because I love Phil. And there's a lot of great content on that site. But yeah, probably watch some tournament videos on there if you can find anything that looks appealing to you. And don't underestimate how big a change it is. You don't just have to learn how to play shallow and play for chip EV with shallow stacks. You have to learn how to play a tournament.
Yeah, that's a good point about the whole sit and go thing. You know, I was doing these. I really haven't studied tournaments ever. I've never paid attention to them. Always been cash games, no limit, and PLO. So I've been getting more in tournaments because I'm just like, well, I got to pay attention to it, because if I'm going to make more content, it's where a lot of the evolution is going to be. Tournaments aren't going away. They're only getting bigger and bigger. So you have to start covering tournaments or playing tournaments. And I'm just seeing these pay jumps and I go, man, 3-handed, 4-handed, you have to know your shit, because this is where it really matters in these tournaments, is you have to understand how to do that. And I imagine a lot of players out there, they don't, not even knowingly really, they play a bunch of 9-handed and then they find themselves in a spot 5-handed and they're like, oh, click, click, click. They're kind of clicking around, and not saying they can't win, which is what's great about tournaments. But that's where a lot of skill seems to be, is in that short-handed variant.
It's pretty easy to make a mistake for like a large fraction of a buy-in, calling off too loose or missing a clear open shove even.
Dropping chips over here. I'm shuffling chips. I just keep dropping them. Yeah, right. I mean, you can make a mistake calling off, or you make some post-flop mistakes. You're just kind of unsure how to potentially pressure certain people in certain situations, according to stack sizes, right? I mean,
there's a lot of counterintuitive stuff about playing post-flop at a final table that, I mean, I think I've improved a lot of that just in the last couple of years even.
Yeah. I'm in, I did that video the other day. I mean, Fedor, I don't know if Fedor's trolling me or not. Fedor said you were talking a lot of I'm trying to make these videos where I just want to talk tournament poker just to get people out there, get them seeing tournaments, get them seeing who the great players are. And he was like, you're talking a lot of strategy. And I go, I don't think I was. I don't even know anything about tournaments, so I couldn't have been. But then he started bringing up some things, and I said, oh, maybe. So maybe it's just, do you think it's a hard game to learn? If you can understand how to play mid-stakes plus cash and win, do you think that learning tournaments is a hard thing to do? If you find the right content.
Well, there's two different ways to understand that question. Is it hard to get good enough to make money? Not extremely. I think if you were able to beat, something like 500 Zoom, you are probably a sophisticated enough poker player to move over to tournaments and win at similar stakes pretty quickly. But is it a deep and challenging game where you can keep learning more and getting better year after year? Absolutely. I've been working hard at tournaments for 10 years or so, and I am still making a lot of improvements. And I don't think I'm anywhere close to playing perfectly. So I think yes and no. No, it's not any more difficult than any other format of poker to get good enough to win at reasonable stakes. It might even be one of the easier ones because the standard of play is a little lower. It's a format that appeals to amateur players. But yeah, it's absolutely a really deep and challenging format. More complex than a cash game with relatively fixed stack sizes by a lot.
Right.
It's all of the same things and a lot of additional things.
Yeah, it sounds kind of fun. I guess the only non-fun side is that you have the aspect of you sit there for so long and you play, and you have to manage. That's another thing you just have to learn is how do I play a 9 to 12 hour session when I go deep here, and you're playing consistently. Sure. So you got to keep your mind strong, and you got to make sure, okay, I'm locked in the end, because we've established that the end is when it matters the most. So you have to figure out a way to sustain that energy for long periods of time, which I'm sure is a huge challenge for a lot of people out there. Just another thing that you kind of have to get better at that you might not think about having to get better at too. And
yeah, if you're a bit of a sick masochist like me, that is part of the fun of it. I enjoy the challenge of continuing to play well through fatigue. I like the challenge of marathon sessions. I like the challenge of playing every day for a month straight. That's maybe a little bit crazy, but it's fun for me. I don't know.
I've been the same way. I mean, yeah, I've always liked those long I did the prop bets where I played the 24 hours in sessions. So those have always been things I personally enjoyed. And maybe
exactly. You've done a bunch of that kind of volume prop bet stuff.
Oh yeah. I look back. I know. I think
you're a sicko too.
Well, I think maybe I should have challenged myself differently instead of saying, okay, mass tabling Supernova Elite. Just got around to the whole idea of getting to high stakes sooner, because I was like, well, I need to get to high stakes 24 tabling, and that's not a very good. When you're shot taking, you shouldn't be 24 tabling. You're getting used to stakes, the money, the players. The players a little bit better, different when you go down a $600 buy-in, a $1,000 buy-in, a $2,000 buy-in. So in retrospect, I wish I would have applied that to a different way of poker, But at the time, I was so enamored with the whole Supernova Elite system and the idea that you have to play a lot of hands, get in a lot of hands. I just was enamored by that idea so much that it took over my being. And now I look back and I go, I shouldn't have done that. So, but those challenges, they certainly give you self-confidence and belief in yourself. If you can accomplish something like that, is just so mentally grueling and taxing that, you could probably overcome most things, and there might not be many more challenges than trying to have a winning session while 24 tabling for 24 hours straight. I mean, that's pretty.
I don't think I could do that. No.
So, my man Chris Crooks in the chat. Shout out to Chris. He said that the worst thing you could do is win a tournament, and if you get known for winning a tournament, then everyone's going to think you're good no matter what for the end of time.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, what was the question exactly?
He was just saying that he was pointing out that if you win a tournament, then people are going to think you're good forever, no matter how bad you are. And I guess that's an interesting point. If the tournament is televised and it gets out there and you win a tournament, people are just going to hear your name. And I think people still associate a tournament winner with being good at poker. So
sure,
because how else are you supposed to gauge success as someone who's maybe very unfamiliar with the poker world? Maybe you say, okay, well, how do I gauge? Okay, my friends told me he's good. Okay, I saw that he won this. Okay, there's really no barriers to say, okay, this is how we identify good players. If we don't have much information, we just go with whatever the media tells us or whatever we've seen.
If your exposure to poker is watching it on TV occasionally, who else are you going to think is good except the person who won when you were watching?
Right, exactly. When you watch that and you see, no matter who it is, I mean, that's what we used to think back in the day on ESPN. We'd watch those tournaments, and I mean, to me, I'd say, God, I mean, these guys are the best, right? And they're on ESPN. They've winning tournaments. This guy won a $2,000 no limit hold'em tournament, and the guy's a god. And then you start to maybe understand over time that there's different parameters that other players might set to consider who they think's good. And maybe to some players, just winning a tournament means you're a really good player too. That's all that they perceive that as good. So I think different levels of educational players and the way you perceive the game is going to impact the way that you perceive someone to be good or weak or whatever. And the better you are, the less players you think are good because your standards are so high. When as you might be playing in a local home game in Alabama and Jimmy cleans up all the time and you think Jimmy's a god. He's like, the guy doesn't lose. He's the best player.
Sure.
So I think that's what makes poker really cool, is that no matter where you're at on the totem pole, you can always think a lot of players are better than you. And I guess not the highest stakes, so you can't. Do you think a lot of players are better than you?
Yeah. At any given game, there are a bunch of people who are better than me. I don't think I'm the best in the world at anything at the moment.
Do you think that's a function of you not focusing on one format specifically and spreading out? Or do you think that is just, why do you think that might be?
Well, I mean, not that many people get to be the best in the world. So, like, over the course of more than a 15-year career, I think there was a little window where I was probably the best in the world at Heads Up No Limit. Mm-hmm. Might have been another one where I was at full stack Heads Up No Limit. There might have been another one where I was the best at, like, Heads Up Sit and Goes. There might not have been. I might never have been quite number one at that. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, I don't think I've ever been number one at anything. Maybe there was some little window somewhere like 8 or 10 years ago where I was the best at MTTs, but probably not. Yeah. I think I was one of the best.
Well, let me give you one question. I've been drinking a lot of this water, Ike, and I can't use the trusty Gatorade bottle right here.
I have been thinking the same thing. Should we take a
You stay here.
I'm
gonna go
real break.
I'm gonna give you a question. You stay here. What's it like being a party poker professional on the team and a poker ambassador? I can still hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I love it. It's a great brand to be a part of. Rob is really into trying to figure out what's next, figure out how to offer the best product, best experience for the players. And he's, always talking to me, asking me what we can do different, what we can change, how things can be better. And yeah, it's a brand I love being a part of. I think it's the brand that is most committed to doing something, participating in the poker community, doing what the community wants and what will nurture it and help it grow. So it's a great thing to be a part of.
Do you want me to follow up the
Welcome
question?
back.
You want me to let you go to the bathroom real quick? You go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Badly. I will be right back. Thank you.
He's ready to go. Keep the fucking poor guy here another half hour. He's going to be peeing in his pants with there. Guys, let me give some shout outs here. Who do we got in the chat? Chad DeHart. Who do we got out there? Who do we got? Pwned555. Who do we got out there? My girl Shelby. What's up, big shells? Pop mamacita, colamosa, mami, a la mosa de la mosa. I don't know what I'm saying right now. Just making up my own fucking language over here, guys. Christopher Poffler, what's going on, man? Gambling Evolved, Joel Bradenberg. Who we got in the chat? 818 people watching. Is that true? Make sure you smash that like button if you're enjoying it, guys. I appreciate you tuning in to my Poker Live podcast. I love doing the podcast. I'm going to be doing a lot more of these coming up here in the future. They're going to be on iTunes as well, too. Very excited about that. I'm excited to do a lot of good content. I think I got a lot of formats people are going to really enjoy, really love, bring some excitement back to poker. I'm going to be learning some of the great tournaments out there as well, too. And we're going to find some of the new great players out there as well. I'm very excited about that. Landon Tice, my guy. What's up, buddy? What's going on? What's happening? Frank Kahardistabak. What's up, buddy? Fred with her. What's up, Fred? What Bree, my man? What Bree? What's up? What Bree? What's happening, buddy? Nice to see you. Brandon Wagner, Mark Rubin, Too Nasty, Dan S, Pierre Renard. What's up, Pierre Renard? Papi. Diener for two. What's up, Diener? What's happening? Jason McDonald. What's up, Joey Pizza? What's up? What's up, Landon? Landa 501. Will J. T Jones. What's up, guys? Andy B. What up? What up? Christian E. Ulrichsen, legend, keep going. Hopefully we see you around online again soon. Definitely listening. I'm getting in the fucking streets. I'm excited. I'm ready to start playing a lot more poker again. It's been fun. It's been fun learning more about the world, learning more about how the world works, the systems in the world, the business world, the finance world, the political world, the law world, all these different worlds. But I'm very excited to get back to making poker content. And I think there's a lot of things in poker been stagnant for a while. And I'm going to try to create some of those ideas for fun, see what happens with them, see if they are positive, see if they're negative. I think a lot of smart people out there got a lot of fun ideas. So we're going to try to make some ideas happen for content from the operator level, from all different levels out there. And events as well, too. I think there's a lot of fun events I haven't been trying. So I'm excited. N2 Deep LA, what's up, buddy? What's happening? Chad DeHart, 10 beers in Washington, and you give me a shout out. Fuck yeah, what's up? What's up, Chad? Rohit Sony, what's up, Rohit? What's happening, Jake Puzio? Hollywood, you back?
I am back. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Excellent.
People want to know.
I feel much better.
I know, me too, dude. I'm like, I feel fucking relieved over here. People want to know about this TonyG thing. So I was watching a clip with TonyG where he bet called with King 9 on the river, and it was the last hand of the night against Nikita.
Oh, yeah.
And
I was sitting right between the two of them.
You were definitely sitting right between the two, Ike. And you were the most reactionless person I've ever seen in my life to his crazy outburst. Now, is it just because you're just used to that and that TonyG's putting on a low show? Or what's going through your mind when TonyG's yelling in your fucking face because he just won the last pot of the night? I mean, a pretty sick pot to say. I mean, pretty sick hand. So
I was so tired. This might not be apparent when you watch the edited version, but it was maybe 7 a.m. when that hand happened, maybe 6. I had been playing a tournament since noon, played the tournament like noon to midnight, and then the cash game started at like 1 or something. That's roughly the schedule. I had made day 2 of the tournament, so I was going to be playing again at noon the following day, and I'd been playing this kind of schedule we were getting to the end of Triton Montenegro, which came after EPT Monte Carlo. I had played poker every day for 3 weeks straight. I had a cold. I was not feeling good. I had been sleeping like 3 to 6 hours a night because poker had been so busy, and I was just dead. So TonyG was standing up screaming at the top of his lungs, and all I was thinking was, we're done. What am I going to eat before I go to bed? I think it's a club sandwich night.
You're just that fucking worn out at that point in time. You say, I gotta...
I just couldn't have cared less.
Yeah.
I mean...
I still love those outbursts. I mean, I was laughing my ass off when I'm watching this clip back, and then I see you. And
oh yeah, I mean, he's hilarious. Annoying, but funny.
Right.
Better when you're watching an edited version than when you're sitting next to the real thing.
Right. I think anytime you're around those kind of personalities who like try to be really outwardly loud and boisterous and maybe a little needling, after a while you're like, all right. I mean, shut the fuck up, right? It does kind of, like it kind of, you understand what they're doing at the same time. Maybe it's personality, but I can understand that too. What I found helps in Vegas when I encounter people that maybe act like that is you take an edible, but these guys aren't necessarily put on a show for the camera. You're just calming that anxiety a little bit. You're calming down a little bit.
Yeah.
All of a sudden they kind of find it a little funny. So maybe TonyG, you come to Vegas, you take it out. I mean, maybe that's the play to playing with TonyG. You ever played poker on edibles before, Mike?
I don't think so. Edibles just make me fall asleep.
Yeah.
Maybe if I got the dose just right, it would be different. I used to smoke a lot of weed. Early in my poker career, first couple of years only, I used to smoke and play a lot. But pretty much stopped doing that like the first time I had a downswing.
Yeah,
I had 2 years of just not really trying and always winning, and then actually lost for a couple months straight and was like, okay, I gotta start taking this a little more seriously. And have pretty much exclusively played poker sober since then. I smoked a lot of weed when I wasn't playing until fairly recently, but I'm just getting old now and it doesn't feel good anymore. It's weird. I just get nervous.
Maybe it might coincide. I think when you have a general world outlook on things and you maybe get high, your general world outlook starts. When it's a negative thing, you may start getting nervous or fearful or pissed off or outraged or scared, and maybe those sort of negative emotions. Because do you feel like you're focusing more on the general world at large now more than you've ever thought about it, or do you think as you got older maybe, or do you think that you've always been kind of conscious of what's happening around the world in addition to what's happening with poker for yourself?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that has changed so much. I maybe have a more negative outlook in the last few years than I used to.
Yeah, it probably has to do with maybe people getting smarter up there, or people. Maybe it's more we have access to people that we perceive to be smarter about these different topics, who, when they share their thoughts, they maybe take a more detailed perspective on it, and they're looking for improvement. They're looking to change. They're looking to make things better. They're better at spotting the negative things out there, and maybe they start really advocating for those causes. And then we pay attention to those type of people because we are attracted to people who get us curious or get our minds thinking. And then maybe that's why that might be happening too. Just as you get older, you start to maybe you care more about the world, right? Your natural cares evolve and your interests evolve. And when you're younger, it's standard to care about, partying, drinking, girls, those sorts of things like that, because that's sort of it's what we do as kids. But as we get older, we start saying, okay, maybe it's better to care about the future of the world and about human rights issues and about humanity at large, and maybe our children and our families and our spouses and stuff like that too.
Yeah, that's probably part of it.
Yeah. I find it all kind of interesting, man. I mean, I'd do a podcast just talking about this shit, but I got to keep it poker here, keep it moving, man. Get back to my roots on the Poker Life podcast here. We talked about Party Poker, Rob Young, and what they're doing for the community. You know, I talk with Rob a lot. I really like Rob's outlook on things and what he's trying to provide for the professional and the recreational player alike.
Yeah, he's a really passionate guy.
Yeah, very, 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 very passionate about things. And I guess when you look at GG Poker, newer company, they have they had Fedor as ambassador. He talked about GG a lot yesterday, Negreanu and those guys, and they're using a bit different approach and a bit different model of things, and they're gaining a lot of traction with their marketing and with the events they're putting on. So what are kind of your thoughts on what they're doing over there and with their structures for their tournaments?
I mean, I like playing on their site. They run high stakes tournaments that I want to play. I've made a bunch of money there, so no complaints on that front. I think Rob was probably talking about in the episode, a thing I've talked to him about personally, is the really long late reg periods and the impact that has. And I'm maybe not as extreme in my view of that as some people. I'm more toward the middle of the spectrum maybe, but I don't think that there is like an ethically right or wrong way to structure a poker tournament. The rules are the rules, and you, as a player, you play the games that are on offer and try to play them in the most profitable way you can. But I do think that they could modify the rules in a way that would make the game more fun. I think having rebuys down to 10 big blinds is not that fun. It results in, well, for one thing, it emphasizes skills like timing when you buy into the tournament to manipulate the seat you get and the position you're in for your first hand when you're going to be in the tournament for like an average of 12 hands. It matters a lot. And, stalling to manipulate blind increases and table balances and all of this stuff that is not just playing hands well. And I think poker is less fun when more of the skill that is emphasized is anything other than playing hands well. So from that perspective, I don't love the super late entries. And even after rebuy period is closed, now it's like a much shorter average stack, and the middle stages of the tournament are, I think, less fun. Like, I like short stack poker. I like 15, 20, 30 big blind poker. 8 big blind poker, there's not that much going on. You just shove the range the chart says to shove. And so, yeah, I would like to see those tournaments dial it back just a little bit. I think that would be more fun. But I'm sure there's a reason that they do it the way that they do, and it's working for them. They're building huge prize pools, and people are enthusiastic about playing there.
Right, yeah. They're getting, some of the tournaments have a lot of reentries, and we've seen the unlimited reentry model. I know like America's Card Room does it. I don't know if they changed that or if they're changing their rules in the past. I know I saw them do it. That was a big turnout for me if I'd go play a PLO tournament and unlimited reentries. I just didn't necessarily personally enjoy that. But I'm sure a lot of people out there that maybe enjoyed the freeze out. And I think Rob maybe said, or Fedor talked about having different offerings for different people. So they weren't completely getting rid of freeze outs, but maybe you don't promote the freeze out as much, or you don't have these satellites to it. So the freeze outs naturally become smaller guaranteed tournaments because there's not as much emphasis or excitement or hype or ways to play it. So when you structure 2 events or 3 events or all these event series in your mind and you say, okay, we have freeze outs here, but they're lower, and we have this here, we're ultimate reentry, and it's higher, then you're like, well, of course you're going to go with that one, but it's also because you're marketing that one differently. So that one is going to be, people are going to perceive that to be more important and when you're looking at the things to play. So, I mean, it's interesting in that it is an evolution, and it's attempting a new idea for tournaments specifically on there. And I guess what are your thoughts on the rake structure with the Potlam and Omaha there, and as being a cash game player?
I mean, seems like you can't play, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of all there is to it. 3% uncapped. It's just, I mean, you get half of it back from Fish Buffet or whatever, but my approach has been you can't play.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
and games run, so I guess why would they change it? They, as far as I can tell, the model is to rake PLO in a way where nobody who is interested in winning is going to play.
mm-hmm.
And that seems to be working. I am just mystified. I don't know why.
Well, and I guess that's just right. Maybe you make up a game and you make it where everyone just gives you money. I mean, if you're gonna be getting players that are putting in $10,000 six way and you're taking most of that money in rake, I mean, why don't we just make a game up where the only thing is you just give money, right? That's essentially what they're doing is they're funding the site with this super high rake from one game type. I mean, it's kind of fucked up when I think about it like that. You know what I'm saying? But
it's extremely weird.
Yeah.
But as long as people are willing to do it, I don't see why they would stop.
I guess that's the question, right? If people are going to continuously give you money, do you have some responsibility potentially as a business to say, hey, actually, this is what's really going on? I mean, that's a good question as a business, right? Would you want to run a business for that? And maybe that's what poker is like in some ways too, right? If you find a weak player, it's like, I want to play you, and you go, well, you're giving me money. So it's like, do you take their money or do you not take their money? And I think most poker players would say you go ahead and take that person's money.
Yeah. I'm not going to say GG is doing something ethically wrong by having a transparent rake structure that you can't beat.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know why it's a sustainable model.
Right.
And I kind of think it won't be in the longer run, but I am also just stunned that it has been for as long as it has. And they don't do the same thing with No Limit Hold'em. The No Limit Hold'em has higher than competitors' rake, but not unplayable. Short Deck had very low rake until pretty recently, and then they decided to make it unplayable. They just skipped straight from, I think literally they went from the rake being capped at about 0.15 antes per hand to 3. I think they 20x'd the rake overnight, and I immediately stopped playing.
Yeah, I guess like as an ambassador, right? You have to think when you think about that, do you take that into consideration? Well, because where you put your name at it, that's where you're recommending people play. So
Right.
If you send people to these environments where they make games, and you're not going to know that as an uneducated person. If you go to a site and you go, oh, Ike Haxton's place, they're like, I trust him. I want to go play on that site. And then you go to these games and you just assume that the games are designed like every other poker site and that each person has a chance to win, right? Just assume that.
Right.
Why wouldn't it be that way? It's kind of weird for it to be different. And then you end up in these things, and maybe it takes you a little bit to understand, like, oh, these actually aren't in my favor. And I'd feel a little misled personally if that's where I was going to go to a new place and somebody said, yeah, come on, it's a great site. And then, I don't know, man. That's what I
don't know that I would feel great as a player being an ambassador for a site that was using rake structures like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's definitely an important difference between that and, like, for example, what I left stars over. Mm-hmm. Having a bad rake structure that is transparent and offering people the opportunity to do something that frankly seems kind of insane isn't great, but it's not criminal the way that stars reneging on Supernova Elite, for example, was. But yeah, I don't love it. I would prefer to see them do something different, not only so that I could play in the games, but just because it seems nicer. But I don't know. I do think that, they are serving lots of gray markets and they have lots of payment processing costs to recoup, and maybe it would just not be viable for them to offer high stakes cash with a beatable rake. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's something I think a lot of players who haven't spent much time thinking about things from the operator side might underestimate, is that depending on the types of payment processing that they're using, sites are spending a couple percent or maybe even up to like 10% on transaction costs to process a deposit. If an amateur player wants to put $1,000 on the site might be paying 10 or 30 or even $100 to facilitate that, and they need to recoup that in rake over the time that money lasts before it goes into the account of somebody who wants to cash out, where they're going to pay some expense on that end as well. And sites track the percentage of deposits that they capture as rake before they're cashed out, and they need that to be quite a bit higher than the expenses that they incur to process those transactions. And depending on the markets you're working in and how you're doing that, you can potentially need to capture quite a lot of the deposit in order to have a viable business. At the same time, if that creates an environment that players can't win in, that's pretty gross for everyone involved. I don't know. But it is a little more complicated than a lot of people might realize.
Yeah, I think that with the payment processing itself, it's been such an expensive business. And someone I'm friends with they recently started a processing company that they actually have on some sites now. It's called Prize Out, which you instantly get a gift card, and you actually get more money for your gift card, but it's for a gift card for a variety of options. And in that situation,
right,
that is a solve for that type of issue, in that paying the fee on both sides, for the cash out side, for the player side. So it's a very interesting kind of evolution. I'm surprised that we wouldn't have better payment processing offerings out there for operators and for these kind of sites that move money around. I guess Bitcoin does that in some ways, right? Would that be a big fee for? Is it less of a fee if you're operating in Bitcoin then?
I don't know a lot about the payment processing side of things. I do think it seems like Bitcoin and other cryptos are a way to pay fewer fees than if you're dealing with credit cards and banks, for sure. At the same time, that has its own costs and hidden costs as well. Like, Bitcoin is volatile.
Right.
If people are depositing in Bitcoin and you're crediting their accounts with an amount denominated in US dollars, and then they cash out and you convert back to Bitcoin, but on the back end, it all stays as Bitcoin the whole time. Is your site just going to go under if the price of Bitcoin crashes? Are you going to not be able to cover deposits? Are you going to have to spend money converting that Bitcoin to US dollars and back again in order to hedge against that possibility? Or are you going to be shorting Bitcoin on an exchange as a hedge? There's a lot of complication in trying to run a business that way too. I don't think there are easy answers.
Yeah, right. I mean, definitely more challenging than I think a lot of people out there suspect. Not in addition to the payment processing fee, you have to pay your operations team, and you have to pay your marketing team, and out from there, right? So there are
running
a
a
lot of
poker
costs.
site is not cheap.
Right. I think I've researched a lot of PokerStars financials, and when you really see how much money they spend on the marketing and all these different things, I mean, they're making a lot of money too, but they're spending a lot of money to make a lot of money. They're not, and that's the thing. I actually think I am starting to understand this about business as I'm looking at other businesses out there, not being a professional poker player, not being a poker player, is that, okay, well, a lot of their businesses, you spend money to make money. In poker, I didn't always see it that way. You spend money on maybe like a hold'em manager or something like that, or you spend money on trips to go make money. But the whole concept of spending money, it wasn't necessarily as relevant to me, because I would just go on these sites and play, and you make money oftentimes. And I didn't think about,
a professional poker player has very different cash flow from most businesses.
Right, exactly, right. It's so different. And now when you see business, I'm like, oh, you spend $1,000 here, you make $10,000 back. It's like, oh, that makes sense, whether it's you create a better product, or you create a better ad, or you create a better marketing plan. And there's all these different challenges that come up in general business versus poker playing business. So it's kind of like a shock. I'm like, oh my God, it's way different than a lot different industry. So it's fun, man. Do you ever get any business yourself or anything like that outside of poker? I know you're big in stables, backing, that kind of stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I do a bunch of buying action and that kind of thing. I have not really gotten into running any businesses of my own. I've thrown money at other people's businesses a handful of times, but mostly my investing outside poker is the absolute most boring kind imaginable. Buy a couple of ETFs and let them sit there.
Mm-hmm. So you're big into, do you have a lot of a passive income set up or assets set up outside of poker that are going to keep making you money over time?
I mean, just the most boring stuff you could imagine. I own some stocks. I own a portfolio of like 3 ETFs. I have a U.S. fund, an international fund, and an emerging markets fund, and I hope it goes up. I am mostly pretty skeptical about any kind of fancier investing if you're not going to do it as a full-time job. Mm-hmm. I'm not big into trying to find a handful of either stocks or private businesses that I think are a better place to park my money than the stock market at large. I don't think I'm an expert at that. Don't think I have any reason to expect I should have an edge.
Yeah, I've been researching these areas a lot, just trying to understand them more and try to understand, okay, where do you want to put your money at if you want to be financially literate and kind of understand how the world works. And I think to understand how the world works, you need to understand how the financial system was created and how that works and how the money machine in America and around the world work too. So spending a lot of time studying that, focusing on that, and I think it'll pay off. I think it'll pay off quite handily, just to have the knowledge and information and be able to pass that information on to people that you're friends with or that you know, or through content potentially down the road at some point in time for me. So I've been trying to learn a lot more about that. But
that's cool. Yeah. What kind of stuff have you been reading or watching?
I think the main point you start with I'm wondering why I didn't learn this stuff when you're in school, which is the whole idea of assets versus liabilities, in terms of the assets is how you build wealth and how you build the financial freedom versus the idea that the value that you contribute to a business or to a person, they decide that, the market decides that, versus this other idea I had in my mind, which is like you had to always be hourly. And if you worked hard, you made maybe, the most you can make is maybe $15 an hour, $100 an hour, $200 an hour. But in reality, you can think about business differently in that if you solve more expensive problems, then you're actually going to get more money back. So when you're thinking about acquiring skills and knowledge in areas, if money's a motivator or something that you're interested in, then you should focus your efforts and study on those higher value areas and those more expensive kind of problems or problems that you can build to scale in a business. So kind of starting there and then learning about what the assets are in terms of real estate. And you mentioned investments and the idea of investing in companies and whether you're, and I guess one thing I think about is maybe partnering with companies where you get percentage of equity in the companies because of the knowledge that you bring to the forefront or the network you bring to the forefront too. So it's kind of these different worlds that you don't necessarily think about when you're a poker player. But once you start to gather a network and gather knowledge in areas that other people don't have knowledge in, then you actually present value to these companies that I never even thought about that before. So those are things I've really learned about now and how to think about that. It's a challenging thing because it's just much different than poker.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you kind of think about, why didn't I learn about this shit when I was in school, the whole financial part of things. And that's a whole other, it's a whole other ballgame altogether. So let me see some questions we got on Twitter for you, brother. Let me see. Oh, I got one from Haralabrab. I think he sent me this on Instagram. He said, ask him about something about coaching a rec in a heads-up match. Has that happened before?
Yes. Bob hired me he had arranged for a heads-up match between a guy who was not a professional poker player and another guy who was not a professional poker player. And we were hoping we could train our guy to beat the other guy. And didn't really work out. I went and lived in Bob's house in LA. Bob wasn't there. I was just living there by myself in Bob's house in Beverly Hills. This was the same week I did the Rogan podcast, like 6 years ago or whatever. So yeah, it was just me in Bob's house with a little break to go on the Rogan podcast. And other than that, I was just hosting coaching sessions for this guy, trying to teach him how to play heads up no limit. And it was a real challenge trying to go from scratch to teach a guy who didn't really know what he was doing how to play heads up no limit. We were just working on like pre-flop ranges, like on the button you're going to open raise to 2.5 big blinds with this list of hands, and we would just play hands. I'd pretend to be the other guy who, like, we had some stats on how he played, and I would try to emulate that strategy and give this guy a good practice environment, and he'll be going pretty well for like 10, 15 hands in a row, and then he'd limp. I'd be like, what? That play's not allowed. We've been over this. You never limp. There's no limping. There's a list of hands. You raise them to 2.5 big blinds. Why'd you limp this one? I just got confused.
Interesting, yeah.
So, yeah, that was a unique challenge.
So he didn't get better. He didn't get better. He
didn't get better.
Okay.
And yeah, we finally sent him in there to play the heads-up match, and I think we pulled out after about 3 hours.
He got beat down pretty quickly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just gave up immediately.
Jeez. I mean, yeah, it's probably a lot harder than it looks to teach a new person how to play poker. I mean, to us, it makes so much sense, but I guess we forget how hard it is to progress for a lot of people out there in terms of how to play the game and how to approach the idea of playing it optimally or maximizing your EV in these decisions, because I don't think a lot of people really think about life like that. So to think about a game like that they view as fun probably takes a whole reworking of how they think about it.
For sure, yeah.
Right.
Just the idea that you're doing things in a really systematic way, and you're not going to deviate from the system for no reason does not come as naturally to some people as you might expect.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, even if your mind gets a little bit, even if you maybe do it for 10, 12 hands, you just lose your focus. You think about something else. You think about your business, think about your family, and before you know it, you're not really focused on the game at hand. So you need to be mindful and focused in the moment when you're trying to execute the strategy that you're trying to learn. And for a lot of players, it can become autopilot, which, right, at some point in time you get to that, but you want to try to get out of autopilot eventually because you want to keep growing. If you're autopilot, you're not necessarily thinking about your spots. I can imagine tournaments are like that in some ways, is that you just are autopiloting once you get to a certain blind structure. But there are always these differing things where you have to pay attention to other stack sizes and stuff and think about these differing factors. So that itself seems like the thing to keep you interested in tournaments versus cash. Sometimes you're just autopiloting and maybe not even thinking about much. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
See what else we got here. How much of a playing style variation is there amongst the top 10 players? I like that question.
I guess mostly less and less as time goes on and people converge toward, like, there's mostly a right answer and people are converging toward the right answer. So the amount of variation is continually decreasing.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, if you dropped me into a new site where everybody had an anonymized screen name and I was playing against the same 30 super high roller regs who I'm really familiar with, we just played tournaments every day for a couple of weeks, I think I would be able to identify some of them with pretty high confidence by the time a couple weeks had gone by. There are things that you can identify that people do differently. Certain people are a little more aggressive than others. It seems like, everybody knows more or less the right 3-bet range, button versus cutoff at 45 big blinds deep. But some people seem to show up with the low frequency 3-bets a little bit more often than others do.
Right.
And post flop, there are a lot of right answers post flop, kind of. You can use a different set of bet sizes to build your game tree of ways you're going to approach different situations, and different people have taken different approaches, and you can see it in their play.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who use quarter pot versus third pot. It doesn't really matter whether you use quarter pot or third pot in these spots where you want to bet small. And some people favor one over the other, and you can kind of pick up on patterns like that. And in late stages, I think final tables are where there's the widest variation because we have the least idea what the right answers are, as I was talking about earlier. There's a pretty wide range of how very strong players are approaching final tables. Some people are playing a strategy that is very heavy on big open jams and big 3-bet jams and just getting all in. And other people are playing much more of a small ball-y sort of strategy with a lot more min raising and not all in 3-betting. And you can tell there are groups of people who study together and who have settled on different approaches, and you can, I think, fairly quickly playing final tables with people identify kind of which school they're coming from with a lot of that stuff. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the amount of variation is, I think, much less than it was certainly 10 years ago, probably even 5 years ago. But at the same time, there's still quite a lot.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, it sounds like a fun challenge, right? Just kind of the game evolves and the game's different. And I'm sure when you see recreationals pop in there, they play a completely different style.
Of course, yeah.
Right, yeah. Makes sense. Yeah, they just choose...
the further you get from the top, the more variation there is, naturally.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like eventually, with all the content out there, that the average skill level will continue to rise.
Absolutely.
I would assume, right? Like a natural evolution would be the better the teachers, then the better the general education is going to be, and therefore that should rise up. And then those weaker players kind of come in and they learn quickly what the average standard play is because the standard play becomes differently. And I guess that'll be interesting when that happens, right? And then see if people enjoy it or stick around. Maybe people don't enjoy it as much.
It already has happened, for sure.
Yeah.
I think there's probably been a larger change over the last 10 years in how strong the weakest players are, rather, or not the very weakest, but like the average amateur at high stakes has improved by more than the average pro in the last 10 years. The average, like, frequent recreational player at high stakes no limit these days is a damn good poker player. Like, these people would mostly have beaten the games that I came up playing in 2008, 2009. The amateurs who play all of the high stakes live tournaments, guys like Orpin or Carey or whatever, those are good poker players.
Mm-hmm. That's real interesting stuff. It's interesting stuff. What happens, I guess, with those guys, they've obviously succeeded in other areas of life. And we've always heard this mentioned, the guys that succeed in other areas of life when they come to poker, like poker's not this thing they can't intuitively figure out by asking the other smart people or trading information or just paying attention and trying to come to educated answers in terms of what these people might be doing. So it's not necessarily this right. It's not impossible to kind of figure out if you're a thinking person like that. So it's
no, of course not.
You know, Perkins talked about this a lot, where he knows the right play, he just doesn't want to make the right play. You know, he just doesn't care as much. And I think there's, there's a lot of players that are like that in poker that approach things like that.
Yeah.
They just don't care, right? I think sometimes when I go play, I just don't care what the right play is occasionally, and I'll do something because I want to have fun. Like, and that's the idea of a fun player, is that a fun player makes decisions because they want to have a good time. And is there some sort of balance? Does this move to poker one way make it an unfun experience for the fun players who ultimately help to drive the game too? And, you know, I don't know if that's the case. Do you think it's the case in the games you're playing in terms of the personalities, in terms of the mannerisms, and just the way people approach the game, more of a methodical robot style versus a emotional and reactive kind of style?
Yeah, I don't know. I think in the high stakes tournaments, for the most part, even people who are playing for fun, what's fun for them is the challenge of trying to play really well. And I maybe I am biased. I'm sure I'm biased for a variety of reasons, but to me, that is the most fun way to play poker, is to be trying to make the best play. I've had the experience of like playing in a fun game where we're playing for insignificant stakes and everybody's just trying to have a good time and nobody wants you to be thinking hard and trying to make the best play and check calling the flop and leading the turn for 20% pot on the right cards and whatever. And I just don't know what I'm supposed to do. I like, literally, when it's my turn, I don't know how I'm supposed to make a decision if I'm supposed to be choosing something other than the best play. Like, yeah. I don't know what to think about. So, yeah, for me, what makes poker fun is trying to play my best. And I think for a lot of recreational players, it's the same thing. I think it's not necessarily true that fun players want to have fun by playing bad on purpose. Some do, but I think there's a lot of room for. I mean, it almost doesn't make sense to me, right? Like, if you were to go play golf for fun, nobody like turns their club around and hits the ball with the wrong side just for lols. Like, yeah. You go to play golf for fun, you try to play your best, more or less. Like, maybe you don't bring your like absolute
best clubs
11 out of 10 focus every day, but like each time you go to make a shot, you just try to make the best shot. And I kind of can't relate to approaching poker in a way other than that. Yeah. And I understand that this is just like a thing that it's a gap in my understanding, that I don't get what is fun about playing that on purpose. But that really is how I feel about it. And I do think that there's a lot of room for poker to be a fun recreational activity where the point of the game is to try to play well.
I went to play one session for fun, where I played I was like, what would a fun play? It was like a game in Vegas, and I was walking around. And it was a lot of fun. I got to say, I found out the allure. People are like looking at you like, they're like, what is this fucking idiot doing? Like, you're just making random moves and just doing random things, and you're showing down bluffs, and they just get so furious that it's hilarious. I mean, it was like the funniest thing I've ever seen. And in that moment, I understood what a fun player meant. It took me 12 years to understand what a fun player meant, but I finally understood what it meant and why it was so fun. And it was pretty fun. It's also fun just making good plays and crushing people that too. Like, that's pretty fun as well. Like, trying to make right decisions and trying to win, that's fun too. But I could understand the allure of trying to have fun, but maybe when the stakes didn't necessarily mean much to you, and there was just a small amount of money, kind of thing like that. So
yeah, that's maybe an exercise I should do sometime, is go play stakes where I don't care about the money and try to learn how that feels and what that's about. I think that I could possibly learn a lot there.
I think so, yeah. I think you'd learn a lot about how the fun player approaches the game, and maybe what they're looking for when they play, and what makes things fun, and what just an alternative view on poker, because most players aren't necessarily this professional type. I mean, obviously not. They're going to have a good time, and they're going to have social and be fun and play the game, and so let me see some more questions on Twitter here. I think I asked most of these. Will he play in the Poppy 500K PLO Invitational? Yeah. Will you play? If we put on the five, I want to put on the biggest pot limit tournament of all time at some point in time. It's not called the Poppy PLO 500K Invitational, but it's going to be, I want to put on a $500,000 pot limit event at some point in time, the biggest pot limit event of all time. I feel like you're going to play if there's the right field in there.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get more than a couple of the best players to play that, I don't think I'm going to show up and play that if it's like me and, I don't know, Grasvis and Omaha for rolls and Ben 86. I don't know if like that's gonna get my attention, but if you can get some punters in there, it sounds like fun to me.
Yeah, I'm looking for. I'm thinking about it, man. I'm thinking about putting on more pot limit events myself, and I saw the success of the PLO Poker Masters. It appeared very fun.
Yeah, that was incredible.
Wasn't that a lot of fun? I mean, it seemed like
it
fun.
Was so much fun.
Right. 2-day events, one final table the next day. Good structure. It seemed like there was a lot of play. Great players. All skill levels were involved in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Tournament Omaha is actually pretty good. I think I had not given it as much respect as it deserved in the past. It seemed like PLO gets really weird at final tables when the payouts come into play, playing the bubble, playing three-handed. But I think playing a lot of short deck tournaments with the Triton events helped me to realize that playing tournament poker in games other than No Limit can actually be very interesting. It gets very weird, but it's actually very interesting. I think I had not given those formats enough credit until pretty recently.
Yeah, it's very, it hasn't really been many PLO tournaments that have been played for the most part. Like, we haven't got a chance to necessarily think much about it because there isn't
the level of play is not high at final tables in PLO tournaments.
Yeah. Yeah, there was some interesting play. I think, who did you play heads up in the final one, the 50K? Grasvis. Okay, yeah. He played an interesting style. It was different. He played a lot more, I'm trying to remember. I think it was a little more conservative style. I mean, he's a heads up.
Much more conservative.
Yeah, much more conservative than a lot of other players played in those series because we did commentary for Poker Go for those. And
right.
It was a lot of fun. Who else was top 6 in that tournament? I'm trying to remember anything.
Let's see. The final table was me, Kruk, Grasvis, Aku, and I'm blanking on his real name, but Sira Al-Aziz from Stars.
Yeah, Sira, and then Pascal was in there. Yeah, Chris got 4th place, and Aku. Yeah, Aku went deep in a lot of those things. It was kind of cool seeing which players made a lot of deep runs in all the events. And of course, the Finnish guys kind of dominated. Jeans, Elis Parson, and EE27, and Aku. Yeah. Those guys were were crushing it pretty hard. So it was.
They played well.
We need more North Americans in the mix. Listen, North Americans. Step it up, guys. You know what I'm saying. So See what else we got in this list here. I mean, we're going for a while already, man. What do you got playing or coming up here? So you got playing a lot of poker, and got the party poker tournament. You won
WPT's on party, and I mean that's the biggest thing on my radar right now.
Just playing that. What was that one event called? The series, the Shooting Star. Is that what it's going to be?
Yeah. They're doing this event where I think it's an $1,100 buy-in with 100 of it going to the One Day Sooner charity, which is a charity to accelerate the development of coronavirus vaccine, which obviously is one of the more important things going on in the world right now. Sure. So it's really cool to get to be a part of that and help promote it. And there are going to be $500 bounties on a bunch of the pros in that field, myself included. Those are added to the prize pool by party. They're not taken out. So a little bit of extra overlay there. And playing a bounty tournament is always fun. It's a little wrinkle in strategy. I'm really looking forward to that. It should be a cool event, and it's always fun to get to participate in any kind of charity thing and be doing something for a good cause.
Do you like the whole series concepts that we've been seeing a lot more of with online poker, where it's these like jumble of tournaments and a bunch of big guarantees? Seems like it gets people pretty excited that they get to play for a chance to win a lot of money on a continuous basis in these small, sometimes not always
it's awesome.
Big. Yeah, it seems pretty cool. Seems really cool.
I love seeing these kind of series where every day for a week or two there are big events online, and you can just show up at your computer and know you're going to get a bunch of volume in, and yeah, that's the best.
Oh yeah, especially if you like playing poker, right? Let me look on here. Bill, do you have a number one piece of poker advice you might give to people? I love asking this question, right? If you were going to give somebody a piece of advice that maybe would benefit them the most, what would you say to them?
I mean, it's an obvious one, but don't go broke. Manage your money well. Don't underestimate variance. If you're a professional player, especially, or an amateur, in either case, understand the stakes you're playing and the amount of money that you might lose. And if you're not a professional poker player, don't lose an amount of money that's going to mess up your life. And if you are a professional poker player, don't lose an amount of money that is going to interfere in your ability to keep doing business. I've seen a lot of people who otherwise had the skills to be professional poker players, but didn't have the money management and are always broke. It's the most important thing. And it's obvious advice, but it really is the number one thing. You can't sustain a career as a professional poker player if you are not methodical about the risk that you're taking and you don't manage it in a way that you minimize your chances of losing too much money.
100%. I wish I would have taken that advice years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely missed the mark on that at least once.
Maybe most poker players have. We all kind of fucked that up.
Yeah,
a little bit.
you gotta learn from experience. The lesson doesn't sink in necessarily just from hearing it.
I agree. Ricky Omang, the people want a Phil Ivey story. Phil Ivey, I saw a video today, Phil Ivey, that, did you see this video? It looked like a Michael Jordan documentary style video here where he's like, I'm back or something like that. And I guess I can't really pull it up now, but it had my voice in it. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? It's like for Poker King, because he's on Poker King. He's sponsored by them. Him and Tom are sponsored by Poker King. And it's like an ad that says Phil Ivey's back. And in the ad, my voice is in there. So I don't know what happened there. But
weird.
It appears he's back. Maybe because he just settled that lawsuit with the Borgata. So maybe now he can come back and be a public figure.
Yeah, I'm relieved to see that's finally over. I mean, obviously we don't know the details of how it was settled, but I'm so happy for Phil for him to have that off his back. That's been such a nightmare.
Yeah, right. It was like I think that one was $10 million, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fucking crazy stuff. I mean, I know like the whole backing situation for that was different. Like I think they were staked to play those games, and I think there's other people involved in the lawsuit action. So there's like a lot of other side action going on in that whole thing itself that mattered. But
I don't know any of the details, but it seemed like it was a huge mess.
I'm working on a research video for it, and I've done a lot of research on the case just because I was like, who did this Cheng Young-sun, where did she come from? Who gave her the system? Right? I thought it was Ivy who came up with the system at first, but I realized was like he was the face.
No, he was just enlisted as like the big player for it.
Exactly. So he was the face of the operation. She's allegedly the brains of the operation, and they went around a lot of places kind of cleaning up on this system. And I'm like,
who knows how big that was before the Ivy cases broke.
Mm-hmm. We just know about what it was at Crockford's and what it was at Borgata, and that was like, what, 20 and 10 million? I mean, so that's $30 million right there. Imagine what else they got in these other places. So it's pretty crazy. Wait, do you have a Phil Ivey story?
Oh man, Phil Ivey story. Phil Ivey story. I am bad at these. Just come up with a story on command. I've spent a bunch of time around Phil in the Vegas cash games and stuff.
Maybe
certain of the best Phil Ivey stories are not necessarily good for public consumption.
Yeah. We'll ask you something else and you can think about it.
Yeah, I'll keep thinking about it.
Maybe we just don't have any, right? I mean, I feel like that's I feel like we got a lot of stuff covered here, man.
Yeah, this has been a good one.
I feel like we got stuff covered. Enjoy the conversation a lot, man. I'm sure people out there enjoy it as well too. If you guys want to follow Ike, it'll be at Ike Poker and on Twitter. And if Ike makes some final tables coming up here during the WPT series, I'm going to be doing a lot of these tournament reviews, or I'm giving it. It's like poker tournaments. I don't know what I'm going to call it, but it's my version of a poker tournament series where I watch back with players that we know, with people I've had on the podcast, with some of the great players in the industry. And it's a new series I've been doing, so I'm very excited about that series. That'll be coming up. So if we see Ike in any of these high roller final tables, we can look forward to seeing some gameplay of that. And are you posting anywhere else? Are you keeping active and keeping people up to date with what you're up to besides Twitter?
Only Twitter. Yeah, never gotten to Instagram, or I have a Facebook account.
You're not dancing on TikTok? You and your girlfriend your wife don't put dances on TikTok together or something like that?
I do, but I'm not going to tell you about that account.
Okay, I can see it. I could definitely see it. We just go on there and fucking Ike's doing the renegade dance with this girl. I mean, it happens. So, but yeah, guys, if you enjoy the chat, make sure you smash that like button if you're still watching it. I appreciate you very much. Leave a comment after this video ends. It helps the channel is in the videos if you leave a comment in the actual comment, not just the description box. And that's it. Appreciate everybody out there for watching. Be back to a bunch of videos coming up on the channel. Make sure you subscribe for more. That's it. Peace out. Ike,
thanks so much
very
for
much,
having
my friend.